Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep, like prehistorically deep, into something smoky, ancient, and surprisingly relatable. How early humans used weed to unwind. And yes, you probably won't survive this era. Like, no medicine, no memes, and dinner is something you may have to chase or dig up. But somehow, even without Spotify or scented candles, your ancient ancestors still found ways to kick back. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now tell me, what city are you watching from, and what time is it right now where you are? Cool. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So there you are, barefoot in the soft dirt of a cave's threshold, smoke drifting lazily past your nose as the fire pops and crackles. It's late. The hunt ended hours ago. Your stomach is full. Some chewy roasted root, maybe a strip of dried reindeer meat, maybe that weird mushroom that tasted like sadness but left you giggling. Across from you, someone is playing a simple flute, probably carved out of a bird bone. The notes are haunting, repetitive. The flames flicker on the cave walls, lighting up old ochre handprints and a few strange swirling symbols. You're warm, safe. And slowly, without even thinking about it, you're letting go of the tension in your shoulders. Now, look closer. Someone near the fire is fiddling with a bundle of dried leaves. Not for the stew. This is something else. They feed it into the edge of the fire pit just a pinch, and suddenly the smell changes. Sharp, earthy, a little skunky. Everyone gets quiet. Not because they're scared, because this has happened before. They know what's coming. And so do you. See, this isn't your first time sitting through a smoke night. You recognise that plant, sort of. It grows near the river, in the rocky parts. It's not good for weaving. It's not food. But for some reason, someone in the tribe kept bringing it back, drying it, crumbling it, saving it for nights like this. The first time, nobody even meant to breathe it in. But you remember that feeling, that odd, floating warmth, the strange way time seemed to stretch, like a mammoth hide pulled taut, and the laughter, that weird spontaneous laughter that bubbled up from your chest for no good reason. You glance around the fire. Most people are silent now. Their heads tilt slightly toward the ceiling. One person is tracing invisible shapes in the air. Another is humming softly, no real tune. Just that low rhythmic drone that fits perfectly with the flute. You feel something shifting behind your eyes. Not bad, just different. The smoke smells like a secret, and it curls around your brain like a vine. No one calls it weed yet. No catchy names. No THC percentages or Instagram reels of rolling techniques. But make no mistake, this moment, this ritual, is the seed of everything that came after. Even if you don't have the science, your body knows something here is happening. You relax. That chronic ache in your hip, the one from falling on wet rocks last winter, just sort of fades. Your thoughts drift toward the stars outside, the ones blinking coldly above the treetops. You wonder if they're watching you back. What's amazing is, science backs this up. Archaeologists have actually found burned cannabis seeds in cave hearths from as far back as 10,000 years ago. Charred evidence. Proof that our ancestors weren't just stumbling through the dark. They were experimenting, tinkering with plants, learning that fire plus flower equals something more than just smoke. It equals an experience. And here's where things get interesting. There's a theory that early humans might have accidentally discovered the effects of cannabis just by burning it along with other random vegetation. Picture it. Someone scoops up a bunch of dried grass to start the fire, not realizing it includes a handful of cannabis leaves. Next thing you know, the cave is a hotbox sauna, and the elders are giggling like toddlers. Or maybe it was deliberate. Maybe someone followed the scent, noticed the calm afterward, and decided, yeah, that one stays in the bundle. There's even a quirky side theory that certain regions saw faster development of spiritual rituals because their local flora included psychoactive plants like cannabis. Imagine that. That trippy swirl you saw painted in the cave last week? Maybe not just decorative. Maybe the artist was seeing stars in more ways than one. And yes, there's plenty of debate. Did early humans use cannabis purely recreationally? Or was it always spiritual, reserved for rituals, healing ceremonies, or vision quests? We don't know. Some anthropologists argue that casual use would have been rare due to the effort involved in harvesting and drying the plant. Others say, nah, if something makes you feel relaxed and the tribe's okay with it, you'll make time to find more. But whatever the truth, what's certain is that those first smoky nights laid the groundwork for something timeless. A shared understanding that this world, harsh, wild, unpredictable, can sometimes be softened by community, by ritual, and by a little help from the green stuff growing down by the river, so you stretch out your legs, feel the warmth of the stone floor beneath your back, and watch the shadows dance across the ceiling. You don't know what this plant is called. You don't know that one day people in faraway places will pass it around in glass pipes and gummy candies and Bluetooth-enabled vape pens. But you know this. For the first time today, you're not worried. Not about the weather. Not about the hunt. Not even about the strange noise the saber-toothed cat made last night in the brush. You're just here, breathing in, letting go. The next morning, your eyes open slowly to a world that's slightly hazy and a little too bright. The fire's long gone out. The embers pulse under a blanket of ash like sleeping stars. Most of your clan is still dozing, bodies curled on animal hides, a low symphony of soft breathing and occasional snoring. You sit up, stretch, and let your mind catch up. Last night lingers in fragments. Warmth, laughter, that strange floating thought about whether clouds are just invisible animals grazing the sky. It felt good, didn't it? A break from the usual rhythm of survival. But let's back up. Before there was fire, before there was even the word ritual, someone had to find this plant. It's not like you're born knowing which leafy green will feed you and which one will send your nervous system into a full meltdown. Trial and error is the name of the game out here, and the game has consequences. Like, you remember that one guy, skinny, too curious, always chewing on things. He found a berry that made his face go purple and his heartbeats sound like distant drums. Didn't go well. So it's kind of a miracle when you stumble on something that doesn't kill you but instead makes you feel better. Picture it. You're out gathering, basket over your shoulder, eyes scanning the earth for anything remotely edible. Roots, seeds, mushrooms if you're brave. And then, near the edge of the riverbank, you see it. A tall, scrappy plant with spindly leaves and a weird smell. You touch it. It sticks to your fingers a bit. The smell stays. Something about it is nice, warm. It smells like sun-baked dirt and a hint of something sharp like pine needles and body heat. You don't eat it right away. You're not that reckless. But maybe you take a piece home, dry it by the fire, crumble it between your fingers just to see what it feels like. Somewhere in this timeline, someone gets bold and burns it, accidentally or on purpose, and that's when the real discovery happens. Scientists have traced the origin of cannabis use back to Central Asia, specifically the region around the Altai Mountains, which sounds like a fantasy novel but is very much real. Wild cannabis grew plentifully there, thriving in rocky soil and high elevations. It's possible, likely even, that some of the earliest humans migrating through those corridors were the first to interact with the plant. But here's the twist. Botanists suspect early cannabis had lower levels of THC, the compound that makes you feel high, and was more fibrous, closer to what we'd call industrial hemp. Still, that doesn't mean it didn't have any psychoactive effects, especially when you burn enough of it in an enclosed space, like say a cozy cave with no windows. One quirky fact. It's believed that goats and other grazing animals may have helped early humans identify cannabis as special. Goats would munch on the plant, then act kind of off, chill, sleepy, goofy even. And if you've ever watched a goat trip over its own feet and then lie down like it's contemplating the universe, you can imagine a prehistoric shepherd thinking, I want whatever that goat just had. So now we've got the plant, the fire, and the first human who goes, "Huh, that made my brain do a somersault." What comes next? Sharing. Because everything out here is communal. You don't hoard discoveries, you bring them back. Around the fire, you tell the others. Or better yet, you show them. You recreate the experience, the smoke, the calm, the slightly delayed reactions that make everything a little funnier than it should be. And pretty soon, the plant earns a place in the gathering bundle. Maybe it's not food, but it becomes something else. A treat, a tool, a vibe manager. You and your people begin to associate it with specific moments. The end of a long migration, a good hunt, a stormy night when everyone's trapped indoors. These moments matter because they give the plant context, purpose. But not everyone's on board. There's always the cautious uncle who thinks the smoke makes your spirit too light, like it'll float away and forget how to come back. Others think it opens a doorway to the ancestors. Some see visions, some just get sleepy. There's debate, even in the Stone Age. That part never changes. There's also a question we're still trying to answer. Were humans actively cultivating cannabis this early? Or was it all wild gathered? Scholars argue both sides. Some think early humans might have helped the process along, bringing seeds closer to camp, replanting them near water sources, even protecting the plants from grazing animals. Not farming exactly. More like gentle encouragement. So let's fast forward a bit. You're part of a small nomadic band wandering along familiar trails between mountain valleys and riverbanks. And every year, when the seasons turn, you know exactly where to find those skinny green plants. You look forward to it. It's like the universe's gift for making it through another cycle. You harvest it with care, dry it, share it. And yeah, sometimes you burn it for no reason other than to feel good. That's something modern culture often forgets. Not every ancient use of a plant was spiritual or medicinal. Sometimes people just wanted to chill. Like you do when the sun's down, the predators are quiet, and the world feels momentarily safe. You sit back, breathe deep, and let the smoke do its thing. So now you're up, brushing the ash off your legs, stepping outside the cave into cool morning light. Your feet crunch on frost-tipped grass. The river murmurs nearby. A few others stir awake, yawning and stretching. No one says much. There's an unspoken agreement that mornings are for quiet. But you all feel it, the softness left over from last night. Like the world's a little rounder, a little kinder today. You spot the same plant growing by the rocks. It's subtle, easy to miss. But you don't miss it. Not anymore. Later that same week, something strange happens. You're helping repair one of the hide walls at the edge of camp, sewing mammoth sinew through stretched skin like you've done 1,000 times before, when someone calls you over. Urgently. Like panic but not quite death, urgent. You jog across the dirt, heart already bracing for a saber-tooth mauling or a cousin with a broken leg. But instead, you find the fire pit blazing and a familiar earthy smell curling into the air. Yep, that smell. That now familiar dry, bittersweet scent. The vibe, very weird. Because someone, maybe on accident, maybe not, has just thrown an entire bundle of dried cannabis into the fire. Not a pinch. Not a controlled ritual sprinkle. Nope. This is an all-in, leaf-to-flame sacrifice. The result? Thick smoke. Like cartoon smoke. The kind that makes the elders squint and mutter and makes the kids fall over giggling before they even know why. And you, of course, walk straight into the cloud like the fool you are. You can't help it. That curious pull tugs at your senses again. Within minutes, your legs feel slightly detached from your body, and time starts looping, or maybe stretching. You hear the same fire crackle 3 times in a row and start to wonder if it's broken. Someone next to you bursts into laughter for no reason. You join in. The laughter feels like a long, warm tunnel. You're not sure what's funny. You're not sure if it's funny, but it's good. Like your whole chest just got lighter. And that's when the idea hits. Fire and flower, together intensely, Unlock something deeper. Not just chill, not just relaxation, something more immersive. For a few moments, the world becomes weirdly clear. You start to understand the cave paintings. You see the shapes shift. One of the spirals suddenly looks like the river you walk every spring. That deer with 12 legs? Okay, maybe it's still just a deer, but it's majestic now. Definitely majestic. This moment is probably one of the earliest accidental hotbox scenarios in human history. Trapped smoke, enclosed space, zero ventilation, full exposure. No dab rigs, no bongs, no edibles. Just an entire prehistoric crowd marinating in a cloud of psychoactive smoke, blinking at each other like newborns. And here's a historical nugget to back it up. Archaeologists in western China, at a site called Jirzankel Cemetery, actually discovered ancient wooden braziers with charred cannabis residue dating back 2,500 years. These were used to intentionally burn cannabis in enclosed spaces during burial rituals. And guess what? The cannabis had unusually high levels of THC for wild plants, which means someone was either selecting the stronger strains or had already figured out which versions packed more punch. It's possible, though still debated, that similar burning techniques go back even further. Some scholars suggest that early humans, once they recognized the effect, started recreating these smoke bath moments deliberately. You build a small tent, fill it with heat and herb smoke, and sit inside until your muscles go soft and your thoughts go sideways. Like a Stone Age sauna/meditation chamber. Honestly, not a bad setup. Of course, not everyone in your tribe is on board with this escalating experimentation. One elder calls it fire sickness. Another mutters that it lets spirits sneak into your body. You're not sure they're wrong, honestly. That one time you saw the moon blink might have been something. But the younger hunters? They're into it. You overhear one of them say it makes the spear fly truer in his dreams. That's not helpful in actual combat, but it feels profound. You nod anyway. Later that night, while the fire smoulders low, you think about how weird it is that this whole experience comes from something growing in the dirt. Just a plant. Just a cluster of skinny leaves that, for reasons no one quite understands yet, makes people laugh, feel, dream, and chill in ways food and shelter alone can't. It's not about survival anymore. It's about living. About finding some small, precious way to feel okay. The quirky fact? There's a theory, fringe but fun, that cannabis might have influenced not just rituals, but language development itself. You know, like the loosened mental boundaries might have made it easier for early humans to connect sounds with symbols, emotions with gestures, or let abstract ideas take form. No proof, obviously. But it's not wild to think that a plant that makes you question reality could have helped shape how we describe reality in the first place. And the debate? Well, scholars are still arguing over when exactly humans figured out how to smoke on purpose. Inhalation isn't intuitive after all. Eating or brewing plants into tea, that's straightforward. But sitting around inhaling smoke, that takes some trial, error, and an open mind. Some say the practice started in Central Asia and spread outward. Others think different cultures discovered it independently. Convergent stoner evolution, if you will. So here you are, sitting on a flat rock just outside the cave entrance, staring up at a sky that somehow feels closer than usual. The stars twinkle like gossiping fireflies. A breeze drifts by, cool, dry, carrying a hint of that earthy scent. You realise you're humming. You don't remember starting. It's not a song exactly, but it feels right. Inside your head, everything's quiet in a way it rarely is. The hunting stress, the territorial squabbles, even that festering foot blister, they're all background noise now. A few others join you. They sit in silence. One leans on your shoulder without asking, no one minds. In this moment, you're all synced. Not through words, not even through touch, but through shared breath, shared warmth, shared haze. Tomorrow the rituals might start forming. Maybe someone will suggest setting aside a day for smoke and song. Maybe someone else will paint a leaf on the cave wall next to the handprints. History doesn't record that part, but it happened, in some way or another. Slowly, naturally, the way traditions always do. For now, though, you close your eyes. The fire cracks once more. The earth turns softly under you, and somewhere in the distance a goat stares blankly at a tree, chewing like it just solved a cosmic riddle. It starts to rain the next day, soft, misty. Not the angry kind that makes rivers swell and caves flood, but the gentle drizzle that turns everything mossy and sweet-smelling. The forest is quiet under the grey sky. The usual bird chatter has dropped to a respectful murmur. You're posted under an overhang helping your cousin pick bugs off a deerskin cloak, when someone suggests what everyone's secretly thinking. Let's make it a smoke night. Rainy days, it turns out, are the perfect excuse. You can't forage, you can't hunt, the fire's already going for warmth, and besides, there's a stash, hidden away in a basket under dried bark and fox pelts. You and a few others bring it out like treasure, unwrapping it with the sort of reverence usually saved for the first berries of spring. The leaves crumble like old parchment. The smell hits instantly, sharp and piney, with a bitter edge that makes your mouth water a little. That alone is enough to shift the mood. Everyone smiles. This is where things start to change. What used to be a spontaneous spark, a fluke of dry twigs and good timing, now becomes something closer to a process, a rhythm. There's even a pattern to it now. You dry the leaves carefully, you separate the seeds, you keep the buds in the driest spot in the cave, away from the damp. One of the older women, the one with the gap-toothed smile and uncanny memory, starts keeping track of which bundles hit hardest. She calls it spirit leaf, and you're pretty sure she's developing prehistoric strain notes. Tonight's smoke is stronger than usual. Maybe the plant grew closer to the fire pit. Maybe the soil was different. Or maybe you're just more open now, more used to where it takes you. You lie back, watching the smoke curl through the upper shadows of the cave, and it hits like a slow-spreading warmth behind your forehead. Your limbs feel loose. Your thoughts stretch out like animal hides drying on a rack. You feel big, not in a cocky way. More like your awareness just got permission to expand beyond your skull. Here's a historical fact to roll around in your relaxed little mind. Some early agricultural sites in the Neolithic period, around 8,000 to 6,000 BCE, show signs of cannabis cultivation alongside cereal grains and flax. It wasn't just a wild find anymore. People were growing it, tending it, including it in their seasonal routines. Evidence from archaeological digs in places like Taiwan and northern China suggests that cannabis might have been one of the first plants humans deliberately cultivated, not just for rope or oil, but for its mind-altering effects. Which means somewhere out there, some ancient farmer looked at wheat, looked at weed, and decided, both. Let's do both. Back in your cave, someone starts humming. No words, just a slow melody that loops and loops until your brain grabs onto it like a vine. Another person joins in with a low beat, hand tapping on a hollow log, steady and heartbeat-like. And then someone starts telling a story. It's not one you've heard before. It doesn't even really go anywhere. Just strange images. Wolves with wings, rivers that flow upward, a tree made entirely of eyes. But somehow, it all makes sense right now. Not logically, but emotionally. It feels true. You realise the weed isn't just about relaxing anymore. It's becoming part of how you think, how your people imagine. The stories get bigger, the symbols get weirder. Someone draws a spiralling pattern on the wall with soot and spit. Says it came to them during a smoke dream. Someone else paints a deer but gives it human hands. It's bizarre. It's beautiful. And you start to notice something else. Everyone's just a little kinder on smoke nights. Fewer arguments, more listening, a gentler kind of laughter. Here's a fringe theory you might like. Some anthropologists have suggested that the development of social rituals, like group singing, storytelling, even group therapy, prehistoric edition, may have been influenced by shared experiences with psychoactive plants like cannabis, not just inspired by them, but literally made possible by them. Like the smoke softened the hard edges of your ego enough to let empathy seep in. And if that sounds too poetic to be true, just remember what you felt the last time you got high with friends and suddenly realised you all had the same weird thought at once. Of course, there are skeptics, modern and ancient. Even in your group, not everyone's sold. One of the elders refuses to join, says it clouds your spirit, says you start seeing things that aren't there, and maybe he's not wrong. The other night, your younger cousin sat bolt upright during a smoke session and swore she saw her dead grandmother crouched by the fire, weaving nettle cord with invisible hands. Was it grief? Hallucination? Or did the smoke really thin the veil between worlds? That's the scholarly debate still ongoing today. Is cannabis just a chemical shortcut to altered states? Or does it allow access to something real, something hidden, that your usual sober brain can't quite grasp? Some researchers lean hard on the neuroscience, dopamine, endocannabinoid receptors, predictable chemical responses. Others, usually the ones who've had a few personal experiences, suspect there's more to it. Something sacred, or at least something outside the lines of standard biology. Back in your own mind, it's quieter now. Not sleepy, just balanced. You close your eyes and picture the tree made of eyes. It's not scary. It feels like it's watching over you. You think about your ancestors, long gone, faceless names whispered at solstice gatherings. Maybe they sat around fires too. Maybe they shared the same plant. Maybe you're breathing the smoke they once did, and feeling the same drift, the same comfort. Outside, the rain is still falling. You can hear it ticking softly on the leaves. In the distance, a thunderclap rolls by like a slow drum. No lightning, just sound, deep, slow, echoing in your bones. Someone curls up beside you. Someone else is already snoring. You don't need words. The moment is full of smoke, full of meaning, full of something ancient. You smile even though your eyes are closed. You don't know the word for ritual yet, but you know what it feels like. It doesn't take long before someone tries to get clever about it. You're out collecting wood with a couple of the younger guys, and one of them, let's call him Proto-Stoner Steve, holds up a curved animal horn like he's discovered fire again. "We could put the smoke in here," he says, eyes bright, fingers twitchy with excitement. At first, everyone laughs. It's ridiculous. What, you're going to breathe through a goat horn now? But then he adds, just the smoke, nothing else, no fire, no mess. And suddenly it's not so ridiculous anymore. That night Steve, and yes, we're still calling him Steve, gets a fire going and drops a few tight buds onto a flat stone, letting the smoke drift upward. He grabs his hollowed-out horn, leans over the smoke stream and inhales. He coughs so hard he nearly falls backward into the fire pit. But when the coughing stops, he's got this dazed grin that says worth it. Everyone watches, and because curiosity is more infectious than laughter, you try it next. The horn actually works. Not well, but enough. The smoke feels cleaner, more direct, like it's going straight to the part of your brain that handles dreams, music, and questionable decisions. And just like that, early cannabis tech is born. Not quite a pipe, not quite a vape, definitely not OSHA approved, but the first deliberate inhalation tool. You all spend hours refining the technique. Different horns, different angles, different ways of trapping the smoke. Someone tries covering the bowl with a rock slab to concentrate the fumes. Another genius, probably also named Steve, puts his head under a stretched hide to make a mini smoke tent. You're laughing, experimenting, eyes watering, and very, very high. This isn't just you being creative for the sake of it. This is the early spark of innovation. Humans are tinkerers. You can't help it. If something works, you want to make it better, more portable, more potent, more shareable. So it makes sense that cannabis culture, if you can call it that, in 7000 BCE starts to shift from casual communal smoke to something more deliberate, more structured. You're not just relaxing anymore, you're exploring. And here's a real historical link. Some of the earliest archaeological evidence for cannabis use includes not just the plant, but the paraphernalia. Pipes made of wood, bone, or clay, charred bowls with resin traces, containers lined with soot and ash, carefully sealed with stone lids. These weren't random leftovers, they were tools, crafted and used over and over, probably passed down like your clan's favourite firestone or best fishing spear. You naturally start getting a bit possessive about your horn. You stash it in your sleeping nook, you carve little notches on it, one for each time it made you see stars while sitting still. It's not sacred exactly, but it's yours. You feel better when it's nearby. A comfort object with a kick. Meanwhile, the tribe's shaman, or healer, or spirit walker, depending on who's telling the story, has been watching all of this with quiet approval. She's older than most, quiet as fog, with silver braids and eyes that seem to know your thoughts before you say them. One night, after you pass her the horn and she takes a surprisingly deep hit, she begins to chant. Not words really, sounds, old syllables no one else uses anymore. Her voice wavers, low and rhythmic like a stream under ice, and suddenly the vibe in the cave shifts. The smoke stops being casual. The fire seems brighter. Someone says they saw sparks lifting in a spiral that didn't follow the wind. Someone else swears the soot on the walls began to shimmer. You're not sure what you believe, but your skin is covered in goosebumps and the air feels thick with something you can't name. For the first time, weed isn't just a break, it's a bridge. Between now and something deeper. Between body and spirit. Between questions and answers you didn't even know you had. Historical fact time. In many early societies, cannabis was used not recreationally, but spiritually. Think ancient shamans in Central Asia, performing burial rites while burning cannabis in censers carved from stone. Or early Indo-Iranian priests using it during fire rituals, where smoke was seen as the medium connecting earth to the divine. Cannabis didn't just make you feel high, it elevated the ceremony, made it sacred, made it real. Now this isn't without its critics. Even today there's debate among scholars over whether ancient cannabis use was primarily medicinal, spiritual, or both. Some argue that attributing too much mystical importance to it is a modern projection, a retroactive romanticism. Others point to linguistic evidence, plant residues, and regional rituals that suggest cannabis had a serious role in early cosmologies. It wasn't just, this gets me giggly, it was, this helps me talk to the ancestors. Big difference. You don't know the academic breakdown, of course, but you do know that ever since that night with the shaman, things have changed around camp. People wait for smoke nights. They prepare for them, clean the cave, bring special stones, wash with river water beforehand. The sessions stretch longer, feel deeper. More songs, more dreams. People remember their dreams now. One girl claims she travelled through the belly of a snake and came back with a new drumbeat. Someone else painted the first ever eye symbol on the cave wall, 4 eyes to be exact, one in each cardinal direction. You feel it too, not every time. Sometimes the smoke just makes you laugh and fall asleep before the embers fade, but other times, it opens you, not like a door, more like a window you didn't know was there. You feel yourself stretching into stories that haven't been told yet. You picture the future, not as prophecy, but as potential. You see yourself older, wiser, maybe even teaching the next group of curious kids how to hollow a horn and not pass out on their first puff. There's comfort in that thought. So tonight, as the fire dances and the horn passes from hand to hand, you settle into your usual spot. Warm rock at your back, fur under your legs. The smoke tastes different this time, sharper. Maybe it's the resin, maybe it's the mood. But as your breath slows and the night pulls you in, you realise something important. You're not just getting high anymore, you're learning. You're squinting into the wind, watching dust curl across a rocky plateau, when you realise you've left behind the forest, the cave, and most of your old life. The clan has been moving for weeks now, following herds tracing the edge of a drying river, pushing toward the mountains everyone keeps whispering about. The stories say they're full of gods and fire spirits, and invisible winds that strip your flesh but leave your bones humming. You're not entirely convinced, but you go anyway. Everyone does. Survival, after all, doesn't ask politely. What you didn't expect, though, was that you'd find weed here too. It grows scrappier in this region. Thin, wiry stalks with fewer leaves, like it's had to toughen up to survive the rocky soil and cold nights. But the smell's the same. That pungent, almost sweaty bite mixed with something fresh, like crushed pine needles and summer dust. It makes your mouth twitch into a smile before you even realise why. You stop and kneel beside the plant, brushing your fingers along its narrow leaves. Behind you, the wind howls like it has unfinished business. But right here, in this tiny patch of green clinging stubbornly to the slope, you feel grounded. Like the plant is telling you, "Yep, I'm here too, still kicking, let's go." And this is where things start to shift on a bigger scale. You're not alone anymore. As your clan merges with another group at a mountain pass, one with different clothes, different tools, different songs, you realise they know the plant too. They don't call it spirit leaf like your shaman does. They call it something harsher, all consonants and spit. But the second their medicine woman throws a bundle on the fire during a stormy night, you know it's the same thing. The smoke hits your lungs like home. That night, something unspoken passes between your two groups. Not just warmth or food or fire, but ritual, shared knowledge. You're not just trading fishhooks and dried meat anymore. You're trading experience. Their rituals are different. More dance, more firelight and pounding drums and face paint. But the way they inhale, the way they close their eyes and sway and smile, same as yours, same as always. Here's a wild historical fact to warm your anthropology-loving heart. In the mountainous region of what is now Western China, archaeologists have discovered 2,500-year-old burial sites where cannabis was found intentionally placed alongside elite graves, likely used in funerary rituals. The cannabis was burned in wooden braziers, and tests showed it had unusually high THC levels, suggesting not just casual use, but purposeful cultivation for psychoactive strength. These people weren't winging it. They knew what they had, and they were using it to connect with the dead. You feel that now as you sit beside the ceremonial fire, smoke clinging to your skin and hair. Across the flames, the visiting shaman chants low and slow. A woman next to you traces shapes in the dirt, swirls and zigzags you recognize from your own cave wall. Maybe the gods are the same, or maybe the smoke is the god, and everyone else just interprets it in their own accent. The quirky bit. Some researchers believe that the Silk Road, the ancient trade network that connected east and west long before camel caravans made it cool, wasn't just about spices and silks. It may have also been a weed road. Seriously. Cannabis seeds and plant residues have been found in early trade hub settlements, suggesting that this humble plant travelled alongside incense, gold, and gossip, spreading rituals as much as economics. Which brings us to the scholarly mud pit. Did cannabis spread through these early trade routes because of its psychoactive qualities? Or was it just a handy byproduct of hemp, the tough, fibrous plant used for ropes, nets, and textiles? Some academics argue that the psychoactive strains we know today were selectively bred after trade began, meaning the mind-altering stuff came later. Others say the buzz came first and utility followed. Basically, were our ancestors chasing chill before they chased productivity, or the other way around? You don't care much about the argument. You only know that when the fire crackles and the smoke begins to rise, everyone stops talking. Even the kids, even the big guy who only grunts and eats like 10 birds a day. The smoke hits, and the whole group settles into that soft open silence. A few people hum, a drum taps slowly. Someone tells a story that may or may not be about a giant spider that sings prophecies in its sleep. You don't ask questions. You're too relaxed for questions. What matters is that the ritual has now become portable. You're no longer tied to one place, one cave, one group. The fire moves with you. So does the smoke. And it's no longer about escape or even just connection. It's about continuity. The plant follows the people. The people follow the plant. Wherever you go, if there's weed and fire and time to breathe, you're home. That sense of shared calm becomes your compass. You start recognizing other tribes who use the plant, sometimes by their art, sometimes by their tools, sometimes just by the way they talk during the long silences. There's a softness to them, not weak, but aware. Like they've seen past the day-to-day survival grind and decided to add a little beauty to the mix. One night, high in the foothills, a storm rolls in so suddenly it makes your bones clench. Wind, thunder, sideways rain. You all scramble into a rock shelter, soaked and shivering, and someone, bless them, manages to get a fire going. A few bundles of dried herb are pulled from satchels. They go into the flames. You sit, backs against the stone, eyes half closed, and exhale. And in that moment, as thunder booms and smoke rises and everyone lets go of the day's fear, you realise something kind of profound. This is resilience. Not just muscle, not just grit. This. Sitting in a storm, passing smoke, telling half silly, half sacred stories. Knowing the world might end and deciding to laugh anyway. That's the real magic. The storm passes eventually. It always does. You step out into a soaked, shining world, everything glistening, the clouds peeling back from the mountaintops like curtains. And the smell of wet earth and cannabis lingers on your skin, in your hair, in your memories. You keep walking. The plant does too. The grave smells like sweet rot and smoke. It's not morbid exactly, just earthy, honest. You're crouched beside the pit, palms dusted with clay, helping to arrange the objects that will follow the elder into the next world. There's a carved amulet, a worn spearhead, a bundle of rabbit skins neatly folded, and next to all that, wrapped in bark and tied with woven grass, is a small, tight pouch filled with dried cannabis. Nobody says anything about it. There's no speech, no explanation. It's just understood. The pouch goes in. You press it gently beside the rib cage, like tucking a comfort object into a child's arms. One final gift for the journey. See, by now, cannabis isn't just something your people use when they're bored or aching or in need of a good nap. It's become something more, a companion plant, not just in life, but in death. And that's kind of wild when you think about it. Out of all the things this elder could take into the unknown, the blade, the beads, the woven sash, someone made sure she had that plant with her. That says something. You rise, brushing off your hands as the others begin covering the body. First dirt, then stones, then the soft hum of song begins. Low, slow, without words. The kind of sound that makes your spine buzz even if you don't know the tune. Smoke curls up nearby from a small brazier. Not cooking smoke, not warmth smoke. The other kind. The kind that stings a little, then lifts. Historical flash. In a real-world burial site at the Yanghai Tombs in the Tarim Basin, modern-day China, archaeologists unearthed a 2,700-year-old grave containing a stash of cannabis that was shockingly well preserved. The body belonged to a high-status man, possibly a shaman, and the cannabis in his grave wasn't industrial hemp. It had high psychoactive properties. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional, ritual, sacred. And that's what you're seeing here, kneeling beside the newly covered mound. There's reverence in the way the pouch was tied, care in the way it was placed. This isn't a party favour, it's a tool, maybe to calm the spirit on its journey, maybe to help the dead dream more gently, or maybe, if you believe the shaman's more poetic theories, to keep the soul company on the long road beyond. Someone beside you sighs deeply, almost like a prayer. Then, one by one, your people drop small offerings onto the stones. Feathers, bits of quartz, a tooth from a favourite dog. You find yourself pulling out a shred of the same dried bud from your own pouch. You crumble it gently between your fingers, letting the smell drift over the grave. The wind carries it upward. That night the tribe stays quiet. No fire games, no loud chewing or crude jokes, just quiet conversations, heads close together. The fire burns low, mostly for light. A small pipe, newer, more carefully carved, is passed from hand to hand. Each person takes one slow inhale. Just one. No overdoing it. No laughter this time. The mood is too thick, too heavy, too sacred. You feel it settle in your chest. The same warmth as always, but slower. It doesn't lift you so much as soften you. Grief moves more gently through your ribs. You think about the elder, her sharp voice, her quick fingers, the way she once stitched your cloak without being asked. She always saved the best parts of the plant for nights like this. You remember her hands, always smelling like resin and river water. And in the back of your mind, a strange little thought forms. Maybe the dead don't need the smoke, but we do. To reach them, to open the door, to say goodbye without breaking apart. There's a weird fringe theory for that too. Some scholars, usually the more fringe spiritual anthropologists, believe that certain psychoactive substances allowed early humans to invent the concept of the afterlife. That through altered states, people were able to visualize death not as an end, but as a transition. Think about that. The act of smoking a plant might have helped your ancestors imagine something beyond the body. Not because they were high and making stuff up, but because they were, for the first time, seeing connections their usual minds couldn't make. You lie back that night, not to sleep, but just to be still. The stars overhead seem unusually sharp. Cold, but not distant. The smoke still lingers. Light. Silvery. Less pungent now. You watch it drift up toward the sky and wonder if it knows where it's going. If it finds the one who's gone. If it carries messages the way the shaman says it does. You remember a story she told once, half a moon ago, around a very different fire. That souls are like birds, restless, curious, and that cannabis, smoked or burned, is like breadcrumbs scattered along the spirit's path, a way of keeping them calm as they move on, a way of showing them they're not alone. It sounds silly now, but tonight you hope it's true. You hope that Elder is floating just past the edge of the clouds, head tilted toward the smoke, smiling her crooked smile. You wrap yourself tighter in your fur cloak. The fire cracks once, then settles. A few soft murmurs drift through camp. Someone coughs, someone else stirs, then snores, and somewhere far off, past the river, past the hills, a lone wolf howls once and stops. Sleep comes slowly, but it does come, and when it does, it brings dreams of smoke trails, stars, and quiet footsteps over moss. Morning arrives in pieces. First the thin grey light slipping through the tree branches, then the slow creak of sore joints, the soft thud of feet against packed earth, and finally the sound of someone hacking up a dream in their throat. You stretch beneath your fur, crusted eyes blinking against the light, and your first thought isn't food or weather, it's the plant. You wonder if there's any left in the pouch you tied to your belt. Just a little. Enough for a soft inhale or two before your next task, whatever that might be. And that right there is when it hits you. This thing, this ritual, this smoke, this practice, it's no longer just for special nights or sacred moments. It's becoming normal, a daily part of life, like fire, like flint, like the clumsy rhythm of language rolling off your tongue. Not everyone in the group uses it every day, but some do. Quietly, efficiently. It's becoming habit, and habit in your world is evolution in motion. You watch a woman from the southern hills rub a sticky resin along a cut on her ankle. Someone else is chewing the seeds, just chewing them, not even burning, saying it helps with hunger. The shaman now stores some of the dried leaves with the herbs for fever, and a younger healer has started mixing cannabis with poppy for a sleep paste. It's everywhere, in medicine, in meals, in moments of silence. You're living in a time before names, before doses, before labels, but what you're witnessing is the birth of a full-blown multi-use cultural relationship with a plant. So it's no surprise when one of the quiet lads from the weaving tent suggests trying to grow it himself. You're shocked at first. Grow it? On purpose? Like grain or flax? But he shrugs and says, "We always find it near the stream. Maybe it likes water." And just like that, he starts experimenting. He sets down seeds along the edges of a warm, sheltered slope, clears a few stones, waters it carefully with a hollow gourd. You tease him at first, next you'll be asking it to sing you songs. But deep down you're impressed. He isn't the first either. There's growing archaeological evidence from Neolithic sites in Asia that suggests early humans began domesticating cannabis, not just for fibres and oils, but also for its psychoactive qualities. In Taiwan, 6,000-year-old pottery shards have been found with cannabis fibre impressions, and even earlier hints in parts of Western China suggest people were deliberately collecting and replanting it. The line between wild and cultivated starts to blur. You start noticing the changes a cultivated plant brings. The leaves are bigger, fatter, the smell's a little stronger, the resin's thicker, tackier, and when it's burned, the effect hits faster, clearer, with less smoke. The tribe quickly becomes, let's call it interested. Suddenly that quiet weaving kid is very popular. Now here's the quirky bit. Hemp and cannabis are technically the same species, Cannabis sativa, but their properties differ wildly depending on how they're grown. The plants your ancestors wove into rope had almost no THC, the ones they set fire to for spiritual or social use. Higher resin content, grown in sunlight with care. It's entirely possible that early humans figured this out not with science, but with patience, observation. They may not have had microscopes, but they had a lot of time and a deep sense of what worked. So the plant becomes more than useful. It becomes a choice, a friend, something you intentionally nurture. And like all things humans choose to nurture, it starts showing up everywhere. One of the elders starts rubbing it into wool before spinning, saying it makes the fibres glide easier through her fingers. A hunter tucks a pinch of dried bud behind his ear before leaving at dawn, says it keeps him alert in the hills, and around the fire someone proposes mixing cannabis smoke with tree bark resin during ceremonies. You try it once and end up seeing a rabbit with 4 ears teach you a song about snow. Was it real? Doesn't matter. The song was catchy, and of course, with growing familiarity comes growing interpretation. The plant begins to pick up meaning. One group paints its 7-lobed leaf beside river patterns on a stone tablet. Another sings about it during new moons, saying it helps the dreams stay close. Children start recognizing the scent like it's another member of the family. They call it sleep leaf, laughing smoke, fog from the inside. There's a scholarly debate on when this personification began, when plants stopped being plants and started becoming spirits, symbols, even deities. Some argue it's tied directly to agriculture. When humans began cultivating plants, they began to see them as beings worthy of respect, maybe even worship. Others believe the psychoactive effect itself made cannabis seem alive in a way other plants didn't. After all, this thing changed you, spoke to you, took you somewhere. Isn't that what gods do? You think about that as you walk the slope with the weaver-turned-grower. His plants are short, shrubby, struggling a bit against the cold wind, but they're alive. You squat beside one, breathing in its scent. The sun is low, staining everything gold, and as you reach out and gently brush a stem, you find yourself whispering, "Grow well." Not a prayer, not quite, just a wish. Later, when the sun has dipped and the smoke has started again, you listen to someone tell a story about a mountain spirit who gave humans 5 sacred gifts: fire, water, stone, sleep, and the green breath. You know which one that last one is. Everyone does. No one has to say it. You stretch out on the grass beside the fire, full and warm, the world soft around the edges. Someone's playing a 2-note song on a hollow reed. Someone else is drawing in the dirt with a charred stick. You look up at the stars, scattered and bright, and you smile. You've helped grow something, not just the plant, but the understanding, the relationship, the ritual. You've watched it go from strange weed by the river to something you carry on your belt, something you share with the dead, something you whisper to, and it's only just beginning. The Harvest Festival begins with smoke and ends with song, and in between there's a whole lot of sweating, feasting, stumbling, and forgetting where you put your sandals. Not that you even wear sandals most of the time, but if you did, you'd definitely lose them today. Everyone's buzzing. The grains have been gathered, the roots stored, the meat dried. It's one of the few times of year where you're not working for survival every second of the day, and that kind of relief hits different when you know winter is watching from just beyond the hills. The fire's already blazing when you arrive, arms full of twisted fruit bread and a fat jug of fermented berry mash. And there, placed with great care near the centre stone, is the biggest bundle of cannabis you've ever seen, tied with dyed cord, its buds heavy with glistening resin. It's not just for smoking tonight, it's an offering, a centerpiece, a symbol of what this strange, fragrant plant has come to mean. Not just escape, not just healing, but celebration. You remember a time, not so long ago, when this would have felt like indulgence, or heresy, or both. But now it's tradition. You've watched the way it transforms people, not just the heady rush of the high, but the way it changes how they listen to each other, how they sit longer at the fire, how their songs stretch out like rivers. The plant has become part of the festival itself. It's not an add-on. It's one of the reasons you gather. Someone tosses the first bundle into the flames with a ceremonial flair that's clearly improvised, and the smoke rises fast, thick, and rich. The crowd cheers. Someone starts playing a drum, but not quite on rhythm. It doesn't matter. Rhythm will catch up later. You sit down, exhale, and wait for the wave to hit. When it does, it's not sudden. It's a soft unravelling. Your muscles slacken. The tight, nagging corners of your thoughts melt. The noise around you becomes music, even if it's just 3 people hitting sticks together and one guy trying to sing in 2 tones at once. And suddenly you're laughing, shoulders shaking, eyes leaking tears for no reason, except that someone next to you described the sun as a juicy hot melon in the sky, and it broke your brain a little. Let's talk facts. Around 3000 to 1000 BCE, during the Bronze Age, cannabis was absolutely on the scene across Central Asia, parts of the Middle East, and even some Eastern European cultures. Burial mounds from the region, especially those attributed to Indo-European steppe tribes like the Yamnaya or early Scythians, contain traces of cannabis. And more than just burial use, there's evidence of regular ceremonial burning, pipes, and even early tinctures. Some scholars argue these communities used it during feasts, rites of passage, and seasonal festivals, not unlike the one you're currently vibing through. The air is thick now, not choking, just potent. It wraps around you like a heavy blanket. You feel each breath like it's your first. Someone beside you paints spirals on your arm with mud and ash. You don't ask why. The spirals feel inevitable, right even. The kid dances past, arms flailing, eyes wide with that unfiltered awe only children and very, very stoned adults can maintain for more than 10 minutes. You lean back and look at the fire through the haze, and for a moment, just a moment, you feel time loosen. Like you're not sitting in the now, but in a looping thread that's connected to other festivals, other fires, other harvests. You picture another version of yourself in another tribe, laughing just as hard, just as free. You wonder if this is what ancestors feel when they're remembered, like echoes catching warmth. Here's the quirky theory of the night. Some anthropologists have proposed that early cannabis use played a role in the development of synchronized group behaviors, things like communal dancing, chanting, and collective trance states. Not because it forced people to act the same, but because it gently nudged individual egos out of the way, making space for group flow. That moment when a song just happens, when everyone's feet land at the same time, when laughter spreads like wildfire. Yeah, the plant helps. And yet, there's still debate. Always is. Some argue that cannabis use in ancient rituals wasn't nearly as widespread as other entheogens, like psilocybin mushrooms or fly agaric. Those get the spotlight for shamanic journeys and divine madness. Cannabis, they say, is too mild, too earthy, more body than vision. But others push back, pointing to burial sites, burned seed evidence, and ancient texts that mention smoke that calms the spirit. Cannabis may not rip your soul through a rainbow dimension, but it does make grief gentler, laughter longer, and stories easier to believe. Back at your fire, the dancing has truly begun. Someone's carved a rhythm onto a hollow log that sounds like a heartbeat mixed with thunder. People sway without plan. They step around the flames like it's a slow ritual, but no one's told them what to do. They just know. You're up now too. Feet in the dirt, arms loose, head tipping back to watch the stars dance above you. Later, someone passes you a baked root wrapped in leaves, still warm from the coals. It tastes like childhood last winter and a hint of mint someone probably didn't mean to add. You eat slowly, every bite like a ceremony. The weed has made you hungry, yes, but it's more than that. It's made you present. Here, in this breath, this moment. When you finally settle again, hours later, you curl up near the edge of the fire pit with the sound of distant drums fading into the background. Smoke trails still hang in the air like soft ghosts. The stars blink, indifferent but beautiful. Your fingers trace the spiral on your arm, now dried and cracked. You close your eyes, and the festival continues behind your lids. Echoes of laughter, dancing shadows, the deep hum of a culture building itself around joy, and as sleep pulls you under, you think, this wasn't just a party. It was a memory forming in real time, a thread in a much older story. And once again, the plant was there, laughing with you, guiding you, showing you how to feel safe while being fully alive. You wake up in the middle of the night, not from a noise, but from a feeling. The fire's mostly ash now, with one stubborn ember glowing like a tired eye. Around you, the others are asleep, sprawled, snoring, tangled in blankets and each other's limbs. The air still smells faintly of roasted tubers, berry mash, and of course, the ghost of that thick, spiralling cannabis smoke. Everything is still, like the world hit pause. But your body isn't done, not yet. You sit up slowly, rubbing your arms against the cold and feel the faint buzz still humming behind your ribs. It's not sharp anymore, not the giggly, loud kind of high you started the night with. This is the other kind, the deep, reflective wave, the one that doesn't ask you to dance or laugh but to listen. So, you walk, not far, just beyond the trees where the sky opens up and the stars feel a little closer. You find a rock, still warm from the day, and settle on it like it's a throne. The quiet presses in. No drums, no chatter. Just the wind brushing through grass like fingers across a drumhead, and then, like a whisper from the dirt, you remember something the shaman said once, half asleep beside a dying fire. The plant doesn't always speak in noise. You understand now. Cannabis has become more than medicine, more than fuel for laughter or grief. It's becoming something between, a translator, a tool for shifting layers of reality just enough to let the edges blur, not erase, just soften. You sit there, breathing slowly, letting your mind drift, not racing, not thinking, just watching. And you see something, not with your eyes exactly, but with whatever part of you notices things when your mind is quiet. A figure moving through the tall grass, not a person, not an animal, a shape, a presence. It doesn't come close, doesn't threaten, it just moves, calmly, deliberately, like it belongs to the land more than you do. And somehow, you're not scared. You're just aware. Here's the historical hit. The Scythians, a fierce nomadic people of the Eurasian steppe, were known to use cannabis in burial and purification rituals. Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, wrote in the 5th century BCE about how Scythians would throw cannabis onto hot stones inside small tents. then sit inside shouting in joy at the effects. And sure, he probably exaggerated a little. Herodotus did love a good dramatic flourish. But archaeological digs in places like Pazyryk and Arjan have confirmed his tales. Hemp seeds, charred residue, and even gold vessels that once held cannabis mixtures. These weren't stoners. They were warriors, ritualists, people who saw cannabis as both cleansing and elevating. And you right now are part of that lineage. Sitting on your stone in the dark, you realise what those warriors must have felt after a funeral or a battle or a vision. The calm that comes after understanding something too big to explain. The high that's not fun but sacred. You breathe deeply, and the cold settles into your bones in a friendly way. You think of the harvest, of the dancing, of the tribe asleep behind you. You think of the plant, curled in its basket back at camp like a sleeping animal. You think of how far you've come from that first accidental smoke night in a cave so many moons ago. Here's your fringe fact. There's a growing theory that cannabis wasn't just spread by trade. It was carried specifically by certain nomadic cultures, like the Scythians, who may have seen the plant as essential to their spiritual identity. Like, you don't travel without your gods, your weapons, or your weed. Some scholars believe it was a kind of mobile ritual, a way to keep their culture intact even as they wandered across hundreds of miles of wind-blasted plain. That tracks with your experience. You've been on the move for seasons now, and yet the ritual always comes along. You've smoked in mountain caves, under desert moons, by frozen lakes and sweltering jungles. No matter where you go, the plant travels well. It doesn't need much. Just sun, water, a little respect. It's the perfect companion for a species that refuses to sit still. And that's the scholarly debate too. Was cannabis sacred because of its psychoactive properties, or because of its portability? You could bring it with you. Use it for rope, food, oil, medicine, or dreaming. A real utility player. Some archaeologists argue that its spread across Eurasia had less to do with religious awe and more to do with practicality. But others say no, that when you look at how it was used, stored, honoured in death, and burned in ceremony, you see clear signs of reverence. You shift on your rock, suddenly aware that the sky's lightening. A soft grey glow hugs the edge of the world. The stars begin to fade one by one like candles being gently pinched out. And with the coming sun, your body remembers it's supposed to be tired. You stand slowly, bones creaking, and head back toward camp. The fire is still a faint red pulse. A few others have stirred. One of them stares blankly into the coals, lips twitching with the ghost of a dream. Another murmurs a song that doesn't have words yet. You crawl under your blanket again. The ground cold, but the furs warm. Smoke still lingers in your hair, in your breath, in your thoughts, and just before you fall asleep you think, maybe the Scythians were right. Maybe you should shout with joy when the smoke hits. Not because you're high, but because you're here, alive, awake, connected. And for a moment the world makes sense. The sun's already high by the time you emerge from the sleep cave, hair wild, mouth dry, skin sticky with the memory of dream sweat. Outside the world is buzzing. Bees hum over bright yellow flowers, kids scream-laugh as they chase each other with willow branches, and somewhere across camp someone's shouting at a goat in a tone that sounds both furious and fond. You stretch, yawn, and squint toward the cooking fire. What you're really looking for, though, isn't food. It's her. The elder with the crooked fingers, the sharp tongue, and the best cannabis pouch in 3 valleys. You spot her by the river, kneeling beside a basket of soaked flax. You trot over, grinning, and she groans the second she sees you. You again, she mutters, pretending to be annoyed. But she hands you the pouch before you can ask. It's warm from the sun, the cord softened from years of the use. You sit down beside her, crumble a small pinch of the leaf into your palm and breathe in. She watches you, eyebrows raised. You're not going to offer an old woman a pinch? You roll your eyes and pass her half. Raised right, she says, smirking. You burn the herb in a flat little dish she carved last spring, and the smoke rises in soft, slow ribbons. The breeze catches it, spinning it toward the trees, and the scent immediately calms your spine. The elder hums something low, a song you don't know but recognise anyway. This quiet moment in the sun with someone who remembers the same old festivals, the same first fires, the same awkward early experiments with goat horns and bad resin, this is what cannabis has become for you now. A language. Because not everything sacred needs to be loud or ceremonial. Sometimes it's just shared breath. The stillness between two people who don't need to fill every second with chatter. You inhale, exhale, and the world softens just a little more. Let's talk history for a second, specifically about early Chinese dynasties. While hemp was widely cultivated for rope, paper, and clothing as early as 2700 BCE, there's evidence that even back then, certain Chinese communities were experimenting with cannabis's psychoactive properties. The legendary Emperor Shen Nung, said to have catalogued hundreds of medicinal plants, reportedly included cannabis in his pharmacopoeia. He didn't just use it for fibre or oil, he wrote that it could undo evil winds and bring clarity to the mind. Ancient code for "this stuff hits." And what's fascinating is how many cultures kept cannabis on that slippery line between medicine and magic. For you, it's become both. You've used it to treat bruises, to relax a fevered child, to dull the pain of a rotting tooth. But you've also used it to cool dreams, to ease passing spirits, to open your thoughts like a cracked egg on festival nights. There's a curious little fringe theory that cannabis wasn't just a local medicine in early dynasties. It might have been politically protected. Some researchers argue that emperors or high priests may have selectively regulated or preserved cannabis strains that had psychoactive effects, believing them to be tools of divine communication. Whether that's true or a modern projection is up for debate, but the idea that people in high power saw cannabis as something more than practical is consistent across civilizations. Back at the riverbank, the elder is telling a story now, something about her own youth, a girl she kissed during a storm, a night with too much smoke and not enough sense. You laugh so hard you nearly spill the dish. She thumps your shoulder like she's reminding your body to remember joy. You look up at the sky, tracing the soft arcs of clouds moving lazily eastward. You feel connected to them somehow. Not in a mystical, floating in the universe kind of way, more like siblings. You're just another part of this moment, another thing drifting gently across the sky of your own life. And in that haze, a thought rolls in. Cannabis makes time stretch, but not in a scary way. It lets you sit inside it longer. Meals last forever. Conversations echo. The minutes wrap around you like moss. It's easy to feel old and young at the same time. You, sitting beside a woman with 1,000 stories, suddenly feel like you are one of those stories already. Like someday someone will remember this moment. The river, the pouch, the smoke drifting like a lazy thought, and here comes the scholarly tug of war. Was cannabis in ancient China a spiritual bridge or a medical staple? A government-controlled plant or a housewife's helper? There's evidence on all sides. Some tombs contain bundles of the plant in decorative vessels, suggesting status and ritual. Others show signs of its use in everyday contexts. Teas, ointments, dried leaves pressed into fabric. The truth is probably both. Cannabis, like people, refuses to fit neatly into a single box. You pass the dish back and forth a few more times until the smoke thins and your thoughts feel even again. The elder stands with a groan, stretches her back and says, "That's enough sitting. My bones are turning to soup." She pats your head once, mock affectionate, then turns back to her flax like the moment didn't mean everything. But it did. You stay there for a while, letting the scent of smoke and river cling to your skin. Then you rise, dish in hand, pouch back on your belt and head toward the afternoon's chores. There's fish to clean, a water pot to patch, someone's child who insists there's a snake living in the food basket. Life goes on, always does. But now it goes on with smoke in your lungs and stories in your mouth. The road south is dusty, and your feet are tired before you even reach the second ridge. The landscape has shifted. Hills roll more gently now, the trees change shape, and there's a warmth in the air that sticks to your skin. You're part of a travelling group again, this time smaller, looser, just a handful of traders, dreamers, and one guy who claims he can talk to lizards. You don't ask questions anymore. People have their reasons. The goal is simple. Head toward the river basin where the land fattens and the sky stops threatening snow every other week. More people live there, more trade, more music, and apparently something called bang. You've heard it whispered for weeks now. Travellers from the south speak of it with wide eyes and lazy smiles. Not smoked, not burned, drunk. Cannabis, mixed into sweet milky liquid, sipped in temples or passed around under banyan trees. You're sceptical. You're also extremely curious. Nah. By the time you reach the town, your skin is 3 shades darker, your sandals are wrecked, and your pouch of dried herb is down to crumbles and crumbs. The town itself doesn't have walls, just a wide scattering of clay homes and reed roofs. But the scent in the air, wood smoke, spice, flowers, and something unmistakably green, tells you you're in the right place. You're led by a man in saffron robes to a shaded grove. No temple, not in the way you know them. Just trees, soft chanting, and a line of carved stones arranged like a circle that got tired halfway through. In the centre, a pot simmers over low coals, and beside it sits a man with hair like a river and a smile that's older than anyone you've ever met. He stirs the pot slowly, adding herbs, milk, a thick paste that smells like the edge of a thunderstorm. When he offers you a wooden cup, you hesitate only a second. The liquid is warm and sweet, with a bitter tail that lingers behind your teeth. You sit on the cool ground, you wait, and then, like fog lifting off a field, the bang begins to bloom in you. It's slower than smoke, gentler, but deeper. You feel yourself relax from the inside, joints loosen, your thoughts uncoil like rope after rain. The world doesn't blur, it brightens. The leaves overhead seem lit from within. The air hums softly, like it's tuned to a frequency just for you. You close your eyes. Here's the real-world history behind what you're sipping. Bhang is one of the oldest cannabis preparations still in use today, particularly in India, where it's been consumed for spiritual and medicinal purposes for thousands of years. Ancient texts like the Atharva Veda, dated to around 1500 BCE, reference cannabis as one of the 5 sacred plants, calling it a source of happiness, a liberator, and a bringer of freedom. It wasn't demonized, it was divine. And this man beside you, the one stirring the pot, humming something that might be a prayer or just an old habit, he's part of that lineage, a caretaker of the calm, a priest not of dogma but of experience. You ask him later what Bhang is for. He says it opens the gate, the one you didn't know was closed. You think about that as you sit under the tree hours later, feeling the world with all your skin. The bang doesn't make you laugh like the smoked stuff. It doesn't make your thoughts race or your limbs melt. It just lets you see more clearly yourself, the people around you, the sounds between the sounds. You understand now why this isn't something you burn. It's something you sip, slowly, respectfully. It isn't a fire, it's water. Here's your quirky fact for the day. Bhang was often consumed during Hindu religious festivals, most famously Holi, where colour, chaos and laughter reign supreme. But it was also used by ascetics, yogis, and mystics seeking spiritual clarity, aiding meditation, enhancing focus, quieting the restless body. Cannabis wasn't seen as a crutch. It was a tool, a bridge between the body and the eternal. And yet scholars continue to argue over cannabis's place in ancient Indian culture. Some claim its sacred status was exaggerated over time, retrofitted into mythology. Others point to the consistent references across scriptures and oral traditions, the preserved rituals, and the plant's integration into temple rites as undeniable proof of its sacred role. But for you, the proof is personal. The bang sits in your belly like a warm ember. You feel no urgency, no weight, just presence. You're not reaching for insight, it's settling into you, like dew on morning grass. Someone brings a stringed instrument and begins to play. No lyrics. Just a slow, winding melody that feels like it was written centuries ago just to soundtrack this moment. You lie back on the grass, arms spread, and look up through the trees. The leaves ripple in waves. The sky's too blue to be legal. Your body is both light and grounded, like you could drift or root, whichever came first. You think about your tribe, about the cave, the horn, the goat, about all the forms cannabis has taken so far. Smoke, resin, ash, balm, and now this, drinkable peace. You wonder what form it will take next, what future hands will hold it, what gods it will whisper to. And as the sun dips behind the trees, you feel no need to get up, no need to do anything at all. You're not high, you're open. You don't plan to stay in the river basin for long, but weeks slide by like silt in water. Every time you think about leaving, someone brings you a new blend of bang to try, or invites you to sit in on a poem circle under the banyan trees, or plays an instrument with so few strings it should be a joke, yet somehow it makes you cry like your heart's being gently wrung out. You've never lived in a place where people take so much time to feel things, on purpose, and often in groups. It's addictive in a way that has nothing to do with the plant and everything to do with the rhythm. Most nights the circle forms on its own. There's no schedule. Just a slow gathering under the darkening sky as incense curls in from the temple walls and low humming melodies begin to vibrate from hidden corners. Someone produces a flask thick with a blend of milk, cannabis, honey, cardamom and something floral you can't name but wish you could bottle. Cups are passed, and as people sip they lean back and open their mouths, not to talk, but to let language drip out like candle wax. Poetry. Not like the chants or fireside stories you're used to. These are different, slower, stranger. People here don't just tell you what happened. They unwrap it for you in metaphors, stretch it across moons, turn the taste of a mango into a parable about mortality. At first, you feel like an outsider in a dream, but the bang helps. It quiets the judgmental part of your brain that wants structure. You begin to feel the meanings instead of trying to pin them down. One night someone compares the soul to a monkey wrapped in fog. You nod like that makes perfect sense, because right now, it does. Here's a historical gem to savour with your cup. In ancient Persia, cannabis was known as bang too, borrowed likely from early Indo-Iranian language roots shared with northern India. It appears in Zoroastrian texts like the Avesta, used by priests in spiritual rituals and described as a good narcotic. During religious ceremonies, a sacred drink called haoma was often prepared, sometimes infused with psychoactive herbs. While scholars still debate whether cannabis was part of the original haoma recipe, later interpretations and regional derivatives point to its presence in ritual and medicine alike. You imagine those Zoroastrian firekeepers, robed, reverent, lighting flames that burn day and night, lifting cups to gods older than mountains. You wonder if they felt the same slow unfurling in their bellies as you do now, if their voices caught on the same soft edges of verse and myth, if the flame they worshipped was also kindled now and then by something green and humming from the earth. Back in your circle, a man with silver rings on every finger recites a poem so slowly you think the words are physically heavier than normal speech. He's talking about light, about how it bends around corners, how it enters water, how it's never just one colour. It's a love poem, you think, or maybe a riddle, or maybe both. Nobody claps when he finishes. They just breathe out, as if that's the only proper response. And here's your quirky historical side note. Ancient Middle Eastern cultures, particularly in the Sassanid Empire, used cannabis not just for medicine or vision quests, but for music appreciation. Yes, really. Writings from the region reference relaxing preparations made with hashish that heightened the beauty of poetry, music, and storytelling. Some early Islamic philosophers even wrote about how sweetened cannabis drinks brought clarity to the listener and softened the soul. Imagine Plato with a playlist and a pot of bang, but don't get too romantic just yet. There's a debate buried in this, as always. Some scholars argue these accounts overstate the ritual use of cannabis, that its appearance in poetry or spiritual texts may be more symbolic than pharmacological. They suggest bang and hashish became cultural icons, shorthand for altered consciousness, without necessarily being used every time someone wanted to feel divine. Others argue the opposite, that cannabis use was deeply embedded in ritual, and that these references are just the tip of the historical iceberg. No one's quite sure, but sitting here, cup in hand, heart softened, you lean toward believing the poets. Later that night, someone presses a small round ball into your palm. It's sticky and smells like spice and smoke. Hashish, they whisper. Try with care. You nod solemnly like you're about to take communion. The taste is bitter, the effect stronger than anything you've known. Not fast, not dizzying, just deep. You don't float, you sink. Into yourself, into memory, into sensation. Your skin becomes an entire landscape. Sounds echo longer, colours carry emotions. The flute playing somewhere behind you sounds like it's weeping and laughing at the same time. This is not the communal giggle of smoke around a fire, nor the sacred weight of grave smoke or healing balms. This is art, or something close to it. A curated experience. You're not high, you're tuned. You find yourself writing without meaning to, just tracing lines in the dust with a twig, letting your fingers think for you. The lines turn into symbols. Maybe they mean something. Maybe they just look pretty. You're not worried either way. The girl next to you asks what it says. You look at her and say, "I think it says everything is temporary." She smiles and adds another line. Now it says something new, and that's the lesson you're learning in this river town. Cannabis isn't always about the spirit or the body. Sometimes it's about the in-between, the space where stories stretch, meanings slip, and beauty stops needing a reason. The poets here don't use it to escape, they use it to arrive. You fall asleep under the trees, head full of metaphors, mouth full of sweetness, fingers smudged with dust and verse. The stars above feel like punctuation marks in a sky-written sentence you'll never fully translate. But you know how it ends, with smoke and silence. You leave the river town with your heart feeling strangely tender, like someone folded it up and tucked it between pages of a book you haven't finished reading yet. The road back west is dry, full of flatlands and wind, and the songs in your head take longer to fade than expected. You carry a satchel now, not just for food or tools, but for scrolls, herbs, and a carefully wrapped bundle of hashish given to you by the silver-ringed poet. For when the world feels too sharp, he said, and you believed him. It takes weeks to reach the next city. Unlike the river town, this place has stone walls, guards with bronze-tipped spears, and markets that smell like sweat, dates, and roasted onions. You pass under the archway with your hood up and your mouth closed. A traveller like you blends in. There are too many gods, too many trades, too many stories for anyone to notice one more. You don't mean to linger. You were only looking for salt and sandals. But then you catch the scent, richer than smoke, deeper than food, and your feet take you straight to the back corner of a dusty, echoing building where oil jars line the walls, and a woman is humming while grinding something with a curved bronze blade. She doesn't stop when you enter, doesn't look up, just gestures toward a basin in the corner where small clay cups sit in a shallow pool of scented water. You take one, rinse your hands, and wait. Finally she speaks. Here for perfume? Or for peace? You say both, which feels like the right answer. She smiles. Good. Then come closer. You sit beside her on a woven mat that smells of saffron and sweat. She lifts a bowl and lets you inhale. Not incense. Not quite perfume either. It's oil, infused with cannabis, cardamom, and some other note you can't place. Something ancient, almost metallic. She dips 2 fingers into the oil and presses it gently along your temples. The sensation is immediate, cool, then warm. Your body tingles, your spine shivers. You don't move, don't speak, you just let it happen. Welcome to ancient Egypt, or at least a version of it. The history part, in several Egyptian texts, including medical papyri dating as far back as 1700 BCE, there are references to plant-based treatments for inflammation, pain, and eye conditions. While the translations are slippery, some scholars believe these refer to shemshamet, a plant used in salves and oils, quite possibly cannabis. One preparation described involves infusing into fat and applying to temples or the skin. Sound familiar? It seems ancient Egyptians weren't smoking cannabis, not usually. They were soaking it, blending it, massaging it into sore muscles and swelling joints, and if your experience is any clue, easing it into people's minds through scent and skin. Back in the perfumery, your limbs have gone weightless. You lie back on the mat as the woman hums and kneads your shoulders with strong hands. The oil sinks in slowly. You don't feel high, exactly. You feel unburdened, like someone temporarily lifted your body and set it aside so your thoughts could stretch out for once. Your memories wander, the cave, the elder, the harvest fire, the laughing goat. Everything feels close again, not like a story, but like another room in the same house. She doesn't say anything else, she doesn't need to. You leave a bundle of salt and 2 copper beads on the mat before slipping out the back and into the afternoon light, where the market noise now sounds more like music than chaos. Later, you walk along the edge of the Nile, watching boats slice through the water like knives through silk. The sun stains everything gold. Your skin still smells like the oil, earthy, spicy, almost sacred. And it hits you again how many forms this plant has taken. You've burned it, drunk it, eaten it, and now it's soaked into your skin. There's a quirky fringe theory that Egyptian royalty may have used cannabis-infused oils not just for healing, but for pleasure, both sensual and aesthetic. Some texts suggest Cleopatra had her own blend, rich in blue lotus, cannabis and cinnamon bark. Whether that's true or just an ancient marketing fantasy, it's not hard to imagine royalty lounging in scented chambers, drifting into a slow, serene trance, surrounded by incense and silk. But even beyond royalty, this plant belonged to women in ancient Egypt. Healers, perfumers, midwives, many of whom operated outside the formal temples, likely used cannabis in oils, teas, or smoke for childbirth pain, menstrual cramps, or mood. Some historians argue these women were early pharmacists, wielding quiet, fragrant power that left no monuments but changed lives daily. And naturally there's scholarly debate. Some claim the references to cannabis are mistranslations, that the hieroglyphs point to a similar but non-psychoactive plant. Others say the patterns are too consistent to ignore, the effects, the preparations, the way the plant was integrated into both healing and ritual. But standing here now, oil still humming under your skin, the debate feels irrelevant. You've lived the answer. As the sun sinks, you find a quiet place near the reeds to roll a tiny pinch of your saved hashish into a clay pipe and light it. Just a bit. Just enough. The smoke rises lazily, and you let your thoughts drift toward the woman in the perfumery. The way she moved, the way she listened, the way she carried the scent of centuries. You wonder how many more versions of this plant you'll meet, how many more lives it's touched, adapted to, grown with. It's not just a ritual anymore, it's a shapeshifter, a storyteller, a guest that always arrives wearing different clothes but somehow still knows your name. You fall asleep by the river that night, head resting against a basket of dried dates, stars glimmering like small, smug gods. And your dreams, soft, scented, slow, are filled with golden halls, whispering reeds and a voice you almost recognize humming gently in the dark. You're eating olives and watching the sea when the man with the scroll sits down beside you. No greeting, Just a long sigh, like he's been waiting to do that for a few 100 years. He wears a robe the colour of morning ash, his sandals are barely held together, and his hands are stained with ink, the kind that never truly washes off. You've wandered far west now, past the reeds and palaces of Egypt, over dry hills, across trader roads that unravel like lazy snakes toward the Mediterranean. This place is quiet, sun-bleached, and smells like fish and ideas. He unfolds a scroll, sets it between you, and says, "Do you think the gods enjoy watching us misunderstand everything?" You laugh, maybe too quickly. "I hope so, otherwise they're bored out of their minds." He nods solemnly. "Exactly." Then he reaches into a cloth pouch and produces something unexpected. A tiny clay jar, no bigger than a walnut, sealed with wax and marked with a thumbprint. He cracks it open, tilts it toward you, and lets you catch the scent. Resin, earth, olive oil, and underneath it all that unmistakable funk of cannabis. You raise an eyebrow. "The Thebans called it nepenthe," he says, smirking. "Something to chase away grief. They meant wine mostly, but wine doesn't always work. This, on the other hand..." He dips a fingertip into the jar and rubs it along the inside of his wrist. Offers you the same. You mimic the gesture, letting the oil soak into your skin. Within minutes, a warmth starts curling in your chest. Not the hit of smoke, not the slow bloom of bang. This is subtler. A hush in your bloodstream. The sense that the noise in your head just sat down and took a polite breath. And that's how you spend your first day in the Greek coastal city-state of ideas, ink, and unexpected cannabis experiments. Here's the historical thread to pull. While ancient Greek texts don't shout about cannabis the way others do, there are clues. The historian Herodotus, yes, him again, wrote about Scythians using cannabis in sweat tents, and hinted that the custom may have trickled into Hellenic practices. Later medical texts from physicians like Dioscorides mention cannabis as a treatment for earaches, inflammation, and flatulence. Yes, flatulence. History is humbling. And though most Greek use of cannabis was practical, rope, sails, fibre, there's growing evidence that some elite circles toyed with its psychoactive forms, especially in private symposia, where philosophers and hedonists met in candlelit rooms to discuss everything from love to the nature of atoms. Back on the rocky ledge overlooking the sea, you're beginning to understand why. The man beside you, who finally introduces himself as Thales, though you're pretty sure he changes names depending on who's asking, has started a low, meandering conversation about the soul. Not whether it exists, he's already past that, but where it lives when it's not inhabiting your body. Is it stored in the stars, or in the air between words? You try to answer, but find you'd rather listen. His voice is like worn leather, familiar and strangely calming, and the cannabis oil humming beneath your skin makes his questions feel like lullabies you didn't know you remembered. That night, you're invited to a gathering at one of the fancier homes, a polished marble affair with columns, servants, and too many olives. You think it's a dinner. It is not a dinner. It's a salon. A place where philosophers, poets, bored-rich people, and medicinal dabblers meet under lamplight to test thoughts like spices. There's wine, yes, flavoured with myrrh and rose and thick enough to pour like syrup, but there's also smoke, not much. A slow-burning blend in a small bronze dish placed in the centre of the room like a soft-spoken oracle. You catch the scent immediately. Cannabis, dried mint, and what might be opium resin, though no one admits it. The smoke doesn't fill the room. It wafts, deliberate, controlled, a background hum, and then the talking begins. Not the political bluster you've heard in markets or the gossip from caravans. This is quieter, denser. They talk about ethics, about time, about whether numbers are real or just a trick the universe plays to make things seem organised. You watch, fascinated, as two older men argue about whether beauty is an external force or an internal truth, while a woman with braided gold strings in her hair recites verses from a scroll so slowly it feels like they're growing from her mouth. And you? You just sit there, soaking in the voices, the smoke, the gentle nudge of cannabis crawling through your limbs. It doesn't make you sleepy. It makes you porous. Thoughts drift in and stick. You find yourself seeing connections you've never seen before, between stars and rivers, between the way a breeze moves and the way grief changes shape over time. There's a quirky side note to this. While cannabis never took centre stage in Greek mythology, the way wine or ambrosia did, some fringe scholars believe that minor cults, especially those tied to Dionysus and mystery rites, may have used cannabis in incense or wine infusions to help blur the boundaries between self and cosmos. It wouldn't have been for everyone, just the curious, the bold, the ones who didn't mind being wrong about everything they thought they knew. Later, as the evening fades and the lamps dim, you wander out onto the roof, where sea wind meets stars and the world quiets again. You roll a tiny pinch of resin between your fingers and press it into a warm coal. The smoke rises like a question, and you breathe it in with gratitude. You don't know if the gods enjoy watching you misunderstand everything, but if they do, you hope they're watching now. Because for once, misunderstanding feels like the beginning of something good. You never thought you'd miss bathhouses. But here you are, somewhere in the rolling green countryside of early Rome, sore from travel and stiff from sleeping on the uneven floor of a wine merchant's barn, daydreaming about hot water and marble benches and that echoey chambered silence that only comes from rooms built for the naked and the clean. The Romans, it turns out, are obsessed with two things: order and leisure, which is a weird combination until you see it in action. Columns lined up like soldiers, menus carved into stone, and yet everyone seems perpetually halfway through a snack or a nap. When you finally make it to a proper town, your host is a man named Lucius, who talks like he's narrating an epic and walks like his sandals owe him money. He welcomes you into his domus with a loud, affectionate slap on the back, hands you a towel, and leads you straight to the baths without asking if that's what you wanted. You're too polite, or maybe too hopeful to object. The bathhouse is glorious. Warm stone floors, pools in various temperatures. The air smells of eucalyptus, lavender, crushed mint, and something else. Not overwhelming, just a trace. Sweet, pungent, earthy. You recognize it immediately. You raise your eyebrows. Lucius grins. Ah, yes, my cousin grows it. Out east, near the hills. It's not just for the Gauls anymore. He claps and waves over a slave who brings a bowl of infused oil, olive base, thick with herbs and resin, and unmistakably laced with cannabis. You take a small amount and rub it into your shoulders, your neck, your temples. The effect is slow, seeping, not unlike the way steam curls through the air. Your aches begin to ease, your breath deepens. Lucius babbles on about property taxes and the idiocy of senators, but his voice fades into something soft and rhythmic, like a chorus of bees in a sunlit meadow. And here comes the history. While the Roman Empire is best known for its engineering, its emperors, and its tendency to stab anyone interesting, it also had a long and complex relationship with plant medicine. Cannabis, cannabinum, was mentioned in medical texts like those of Pliny the Elder and Galen, often noted for its usefulness in treating ear pain, inflammation, and even as an ingredient in suppositories. Yes, that kind. The Romans weren't big on smoking it, but they soaked it, baked it, and turned it into pastes for every complaint from indigestion to melancholia. But here's where it gets interesting. The use of cannabis oil in the Roman baths isn't just medicinal, it's part of the vibe, a gentle enhancement. It softens the mind, not just the muscles. You see it in the way people sit longer in the warm pools, heads tilted back, eyes half closed. Conversations slow, stretch, turn philosophical. It's not about intoxication, it's about lubrication. For the joints, yes, but also for the soul. You ease into the caldarium, the hottest of the pools, and let the heat and the herb work in tandem. Your skin tingles, your chest expands with steam. Across the pool, two men are debating whether dreams come from the liver or the spleen. Someone else hums a low tune that loops endlessly but never gets annoying. You're somewhere between fully present and deeply gone. Quirky fact time. Some Roman physicians believed cannabis had cooling properties, which made it a popular summer treatment. One preserved recipe mixes it with rose petals, vinegar and crushed pearls, not for healing, but for keeping the body temperate and agreeable. Imagine slathering yourself in weed and roses just to beat the heat. Peak decadence. There's debate, of course. Some scholars argue the Romans never truly valued cannabis the way other cultures did, that it remained a fringe remedy, never elevated to sacred status. Others point to the scattered yet persistent mentions across texts, trade records, and even imported incense blends. They say the evidence is there, just subtle. After all, Rome didn't just borrow gods, it borrowed plants too. Back in the tepidarium, the bathhouse's gentle heart, you lie on a warm stone slab and let yourself fully unwind. The oil has sunk in deep now, your mind both spacious and content. Someone offers you a bowl of soft figs soaked in wine and sprinkled with crushed hemp seeds. You accept. The taste is complex, sweet, nutty, earthy, with just a hint of bitterness. You feel like you could live in this moment forever, just figs, steam, and good company. Later, as the sun begins to set and the sky turns coppery at the edges, Lucius leads you to the garden behind his villa. It's not a sacred grove or anything, just a neat little square of herbs, lemon trees and vines. But in one corner, tall and proud, you see it. Cannabis. Roman style. Cultivated for fibre mostly, but this one, Lucius winks, has been left to get a little wild. You kneel beside it, brush the leaves, feel the familiarity pulse under your fingertips. He hands you a pipe, a tiny clay thing barely used, and says, "Some of the philosophers like it this way. Helps them chase the logic circles." You take a puff. It's light, barely there. More of a whisper than a hit. But it's enough. Enough to make the stars when they arrive seem intentional. Enough to make the gravel under your feet feel like a massage. Enough to turn Lucius's long-winded rant about irrigation into something almost poetic. As night falls and torches are lit along the villa's walls, you find yourself in the middle of yet another quiet evolution. Cannabis as comfort. Not ritual, not revelation, not even celebration. Just comfort. A balm for a restless empire. A green thread woven into the golden tapestry of Rome. Subtle but durable. You sit back on a marble bench watching the sky deepen, feeling the day soften around you. There's laughter nearby, a jug being passed. A dog barking once, then curling up to sleep. Everything hums. You don't need anything else. Not tonight. You're swaying on a boat in the North Sea, teeth chattering, regretting every decision that brought you this far north. The wind smells like salt, wet wool, and disappointment. The sea gods here are not gentle. They slap your cheeks with icy gusts, churn your stomach and whisper promises of drowning if you don't hold on tighter. But then one of the rowers grins through his tangled beard and shouts, something in a language that sounds like it was carved out of ice, and the others laugh like the threat of death is a good punchline. You start to laugh too. Cold, after all, is temporary, and you're here for something warmer. The Vikings don't look like they'd be into cannabis. Too loud, too violent, too busy setting things on fire and naming their children after hammers. But you're wrong. Like, impressively wrong. It turns out these axe-swinging, ship-loving, mead-drenched adventurers have a softer side. And it smells a lot like the plant you've known in a dozen forms already. You first catch the scent after docking at a windswept cove where longhouses squat low against the hills like they're hiding from the weather. Inside one, thick with peat smoke and old sweat, a woman tends a small clay brazier tucked in the corner. At first you think it's just kindling for the hearth, but the smell cuts through everything. Not wood, not peat, cannabis. Burned slowly, mixed with dried juniper and something sharp and spicy you can't quite place. The The woman nods at your raised eyebrows, then shrugs. Keeps the gods curious. You sit on a fur-covered bench, cradling a cup of something warm and fermented, and realise your fingers are finally thawing. Around you, warriors stretch out after a hunt. Their voices mellow, their movements loose. Someone's carving a piece of bone with gentle precision. Another braids dried flowers into their beard, and that brazier keeps burning, filling the space with a low, steady calm that you've never associated with raiders before. Let's talk history for a moment. Evidence of cannabis in Viking Age Scandinavia is slim but fascinating. Archaeologists have found cannabis seeds at several Norse settlement sites, including in graves and domestic waste areas, suggesting both cultivation and usage. The seeds were likely imported or grown locally in small quantities, rare but present. Some theories suggest cannabis may have been used for textile production, but others believe it had ceremonial or medicinal roles as well. In particular, female burials containing cannabis remains hint at possible roles in childbirth, healing, or ritual practice. Not everything had to be about axes and ale. Back in the Longhouse, the vibe is shifting. A skald, one of the tribe's poet, singer, historian hybrids, sits down near the fire, pulls out a lyre, and begins to chant. His voice is rough, like gravel soaked in honey. He doesn't sing in a language you understand, but the cadence pulls you in anyway. You can feel it in your ribs. A story about ships and storms and ghosts that won't stay dead. His eyes are distant, like he's staring at another version of the room, and the smoke continues to drift. You lean back, letting the warmth of the fire and the low thrum of cannabis pull you down into the floorboards. Your breath slows. The fur under you feels like moss. The wooden beams above look like ribs. Your ribs, maybe. The whole house a living body, breathing, dreaming, remembering. You're not high in the way you've been before. This is heavier, earthier, like the plant has roots here, deeper than you thought. Quirky fact time. Some Norse healing rituals involved the burning of herbs as part of cedar, a kind of magical trance work mostly practiced by women, known as vulvas. These women, often feared and revered, use song, smoke and repetitive motion to enter altered states. While most recorded herbalists focus on mugwort and henbane, there's debate about whether cannabis might have been a hidden ingredient, passed down quietly, used sparingly, known only to those who could handle its effects without losing their grip on this world. You ask a man beside you if the smoke means anything specific. He's drunk and half asleep, but he says, makes the stories better, makes the bad spirits bored. He grins, sometimes makes my sword hand twitch. Then he burps and rolls over, which feels like the end of the conversation. The scholarly argument rages on, of course. Was Norse cannabis used deliberate or incidental? Was it sacred, or just another herb in the pouch? Some researchers argue that even if cannabis was present, it played no significant role in spiritual or social rituals. Others suggest it was part of a wider herbal toolkit used in moments of liminality. Birth, death, battle, trance. The truth is buried, as usual, under layers of ash and centuries of speculation. But in this longhouse tonight, the answer feels simple. Cannabis is here. Not as a centre stage spectacle, but as a background hum, a steadying hand. It keeps the edges soft. It makes the rage quieter. It gives space between verses of the skald's tale. You close your eyes, still listening. The lyre plucks on. The fire cracks. The smoke curls toward the roof like a question no one's rushing to answer. When you dream, it's of frost giants playing dice, of whales that sing secrets into the fjords, of a plant growing through snow, leaf by stubborn leaf, toward a sun that barely shows its face. You dream of warriors who cry when no one's looking, of gods who sometimes forget their names, of longboats made of driftwood and longing. And when you wake, the brazier is still burning, the woman is still humming, and your limbs feel just a little more your own than they did before. The gods, it turns out, may actually like being curious. You arrive in the savannah just as the rainy season pulls the sky down into the trees. The air is thick with life. buzzing, chirping, growling life. You've never seen so many shades of green pressed together. The humidity settles into your clothes like an old debt. But it's beautiful here, untamed in a way that makes your chest tighten. The villages rise like echoes of the earth itself, walls made from woven reeds and baked clay, roofs of palm thatch and smoke-stained beams. The drums begin before you even see the people, soft at first, then growing, syncopated like a heartbeat that's been dancing all night. And then there's the smell. You catch it between notes of roasted yams and charcoal. It rides the breeze like an old friend, sharp, earthy, herbal, tinged with something resinous. Cannabis. Not burned the way you know it, not steeped into milk. This is something new, raw, maybe half-dried, tucked into a gourd that's being passed between two women who are laughing like their bones remember joy. You sit nearby, not wanting to intrude, but one of them sees you, flashes a toothy grin, and beckons. The gourd is hot from handling. Inside it's lined with embers, and the herb is layered with what smells like bark, dried berries, and crushed flower petals. The woman tilts it toward you and says a word you don't understand but feels like a welcome. You breathe it in. It doesn't hit fast, it doesn't have to. This smoke rides low, curling around your ribs, settling into your chest like it's always belonged there. Your muscles unhook. Your vision doesn't blur, it widens. Colours deepen. Sounds start wearing richer clothing. The drumbeat that once felt distant now feels embedded in your spine. Here's the historical weight of this moment. Cannabis has a long and winding history across the African continent, especially in sub-Saharan regions where its use dates back over 1,000 years. Traders likely brought it down from the north, through Egypt, through Ethiopia, through Arab caravans and Bantu migrations. It was adopted and adapted, woven into local customs with such seamlessness that in some communities no one even remembers a time before the smoke. In southern and eastern Africa, cannabis, often called daga or motoquain, was and still is used in social, spiritual and medicinal settings. It's smoked in gourds, mixed with other herbs, and even chewed raw. Sometimes it's burned in isolation, sometimes as part of a larger ritual involving song, dance and ancestor invocation. It's not treated like a drug, it's treated like a tool, a key. You feel that now, watching the women dance, arms raised, palms slicing the air like they're conducting the wind. A child joins in, clumsy and proud. A man with a painted face throws his head back and lets out a long rhythmic whoop that pierces your bones. The drumbeat doesn't change, but you do. The smoke doesn't make you forget yourself. It makes you see your edges more clearly. You understand, in a way that bypasses language, that this ritual isn't about escape, it's about expansion. One of the women, the one who handed you the gourd, leans in and taps her chest. "Smoke goes here," she says in broken trade tongue. "Then here." She touches her forehead. "Then here." She points to the sky. You nod. You get it. Let's pause for a quirky fact. In traditional Zulu and Sotho practices, cannabis was sometimes used by diviners, sangomas, to enter trance states and communicate with the spirit world. It wasn't the main ingredient. Other plants took the spotlight. But cannabis played backup, softening the mind, opening the senses, preparing the body for messages from beyond. It was known to calm fear during visions and help distinguish dreams from delusions. Back in the clearing, the tempo changes. The drums move faster now, layered with ankle rattles and call and response vocals. You're not just watching anymore, you're in it. Your feet join without asking permission. You don't know the steps, but you know the feeling. A rhythm you've felt across mountains and rivers, in tents and temples and under banyan trees. The details change, but the core, the smoke, the movement, the merging, that part's eternal. Here's the debate as usual. Some historians argue that African cannabis use was purely recreational or medicinal, no sacred strings attached. Others point to oral traditions, to burial sites with cannabis residue, to folk songs that describe visions and journeys sparked by smoke. The truth is, those lines are blurry here. Healing is sacred. Laughter is a ritual. There's no need to separate the sacred from the mundane when your whole life moves to the rhythm of both. As night falls, the fire grows taller, and the smoke turns blue in the flames. You sit with elders now, each face painted with age and wisdom and soot. They share stories, not legends, not parables, just stories. About real things, lost goats, stolen fruit, dead brothers, bad dreams. They laugh at sadness the way only people who've survived it can, and the gourd goes around again. You close your eyes. Behind your lids you see the savannah pulsing, a green heartbeat. You see roots, not just of plants, but of people. You see the plant growing in different soil, different hands, but always the same look in someone's eye after the first exhale. That look that says, I'm okay now, just for a bit. And when sleep comes, it carries the sound of drums into your dreams. The rhythm loops, the smoke follows. You dream of ancestors dancing barefoot through tall grass, gourd pipes in hand, laughter in their chests, moving not away from the world, but deeper into it. You didn't plan on becoming a monk. Honestly, you only followed the road because it was quiet and green, and led uphill through the kind of forest that seemed like they were drawn by someone who just discovered moss. But then the monastery appeared at the top of a fog-draped hill like a punchline whispered by the earth, and you figured, why not stay for a few days? They fed you, gave you clean water, let you sleep in a corner room that smelled like candle wax and dry parchment. You'd never been so well rested in your life. That was a month ago. Now you copy texts by day, and tend the herb gardens in the early morning when the mist still clings to the soil like a lazy ghost. The work is repetitive in a way that settles the mind. Your thoughts, once jittery and cluttered, now move like slow birds across a quiet sky. You've never talked so little in your life, and somehow you've never heard so much. The brothers don't speak often, but when they do, it's usually in Latin and low tones. Their rhythm is simple: prayer, work, silence, soup. But every now and then, something flickers just outside that rhythm, a kind of knowing. You notice it when they walk past the East Garden bed and nod slightly to a plant that grows taller than the rest. Narrow leaves, thin stalks, that smell you've learned to recognise even before your nose does. You ask Brother Luca about it one cool morning while pruning mint beside the stone wall. That one, he says, not looking up. Cannabis. You blink. You grow it. We grow many things, he says, carefully snipping a stem. Some for the body, some for the mind. That one helps both, on the right days. You want to ask more, but his silence signals the end of that thread. Still, the next week he leaves a small jar on your windowsill. Beeswax sealed, hand-labelled with a single word. Oleum. Inside is a thick green-gold oil. The scent is unmistakable. Cannabis infused into olive oil, with hints of sage and rosemary. You rub it into your wrist that night after a long day of writing about fish. The effect is gentle but unmistakable. Your thoughts slow, your breathing deepens, and the tension in your neck dissolves like sugar in tea. The candlelight glows warmer than usual. The words you've been copying echo in your head not as noise but as soft truths. Dominus illuminatio mea. The Lord is my light. You get it now. Like, really get it. Now let's slip on the historical robe. During the medieval period, monks across Europe maintained herbal knowledge that straddled the line between science and spirituality. Cannabis was one of many plants cultivated in monastic gardens, not just for its fibre or seeds, but for its calming, anti-inflammatory properties. While outright references to smoking are scarce in monastic texts, the vow of humility didn't allow for bragging about getting blitzed. Cannabis-infused oils and poultices were used to treat ailments like joint pain, digestive issues, and even melancholy. In fact, some recipes for oleum cannabis have been found scribbled in the margins of surviving herbals, suggesting quiet experimentation by monks who, let's be honest, had the time. But here's the quirky twist. Some records suggest that mystics and contemplatives may have used cannabis as a tool for deep meditation, not to get high, but to move closer to God. In a world where fasting, flagellation and isolation were seen as pathways to spiritual clarity, a plant that could soften the borders of the mind might have offered a gentler route. Quiet, private, effective. There's still debate, naturally. Some scholars argue that cannabis played no significant role in monastic life, that if anything, it was a practical plant, not a mystical one. Others, pointing to those quiet notes in manuscripts, suggest that its use was simply kept discreet. After all, why write down what everyone already knew? Silence, after all, was sacred, and in your silence you begin to understand the plant in a new way. It's not a party guest here. It's not a vision portal or a post-hunt relaxant. It's part of the routine. You mix it into oils for sore backs. You brew it into tea for brothers with sleepless nights. No one talks about it with reverence or irreverence. It's just part of the life, like beeswax, or ink, or sunrise. One rainy afternoon, Brother Luca finds you sitting under the cloister, staring out at the garden. He sits beside you, tucks his robe beneath his knees, and pulls a clay pipe from his sleeve. Nothing fancy, just a small thing, chipped at the edges, passed down, probably forgotten and rediscovered a dozen times. He lights it with a taper. The smoke drifts up, slow and sweet. He offers it to you without a word. You take a draw. It's not strong, just a hint, enough to quiet whatever noise still clings to your ribs, enough to make the rain sound like music and the moss look like velvet. "I used to be louder," he says after a long silence. You smile. Me too. And then the silence returns, comfortable now, shared. The kind that doesn't need to be filled, the kind that teaches more than words ever could. You sit there together, watching the clouds roll in, feeling the soft curl of smoke in your lungs and the even softer pull of time slowing down. It doesn't feel like escape, it feels like arrival. The desert is quiet in a way that isn't really quiet. There's wind, always, curling over the dunes like a whisper made of teeth. There's the rustle of fabric, the pad of camel feet, the dry rasp of breath. But compared to the crowded monasteries and raucous markets you've left behind, it feels like the whole world has taken a deep, thoughtful pause. You sit in the shade of a low canvas awning, sipping sweet tea that tastes more like boiled sun than anything plant-based, and listen to the crackle of a small fire being fed a mix of palm twigs and something else. Something familiar. The smoke drifts across your face. You know that scent now. Even buried under spice and charcoal and the faint tang of dust, it announces itself. Cannabis. Not smoked in a pipe, not brewed into milk, not rubbed into the shoulders of monks. Here, it's transformed again. This time into a thick brown resin pressed into a waxy lump and shaved delicately into a bubbling clay bowl. Hashish. The man tending the fire is lean, wrapped in white robes streaked with travel and time. He doesn't speak much, and when he does, his voice sounds like sand shifting under old stone. He passes you the bowl without ceremony. You inhale. This is not the warm float of a Roman bath or the meditative hum of an herbal oil. This is something more potent, more immediate. The smoke is sharp, heavy, threaded with incense and thyme. It clings to your chest, then expands inside you like a slow explosion. Within moments, the horizon looks wider. The shadows of the dunes stretch longer than they should. The sun, setting now in a blaze of orange, seems closer, almost too close, like it's staring back. The tea tastes like silk. Your fingers feel like myths. Let's dig into the history. Hashish, as a concentrated form of cannabis, likely emerged during the Islamic Golden Age, somewhere between the 8th and 10th centuries. While the Quran prohibits intoxicants, primarily wine, hashish often occupied a grey area. It wasn't distilled, it wasn't liquid, and it didn't make people stumble through the streets yelling about their inheritance. It made them still, it made them quiet, it made them think. The Sufis, Islamic mystics known for their poetry, music and ecstatic prayer rituals, are believed by some scholars to have used hashish in small controlled doses to aid spiritual focus. Not all Sufis, just some. The idea was simple. When used respectfully, certain substances could unlock deeper reflection. Not every door needs to be kicked open. Some require only a breath of smoke and a poem. Back at the fire, a second man joins you. He's older maybe, or maybe just slower. His eyes are lined in coal, and he recites verses in a language you don't understand but feel somehow. The rhythm tugs at something in your spine. You don't clap, you don't nod, you just let the words wash over you like wind against stone. You learn that this gathering is part of an old tradition, a kind of hashish circle, not unlike the salons you saw in Greece, but stripped of luxury, formality or ego. No politics, no performance, just smoke, tea, poetry and presence. One man draws figures in the sand with a stick, stars, palm trees, a horse with too many legs. Another leans back and hums tunelessly, eyes closed, lost in the music of nothing. Quirky fact: during the 13th century, the Persian poet and Sufi mystic Rumi, yes, that Rumi, wrote of divine intoxication, often using metaphors that some believe hint at altered states of consciousness. While he didn't mention hashish by name, and some argue he'd never touched the stuff, his followers, and many other Sufi sects, may have quietly embraced its use as a means to deepen trance and devotional practice. Hashish wasn't used recklessly. It was a tool, a stepping stone, a companion for crossing into the space between silence and prayer. But of course there's debate. Always is. Some Islamic scholars condemned hashish as an invention of the devil, a path to laziness, obscenity, and madness. Others viewed it as less dangerous than alcohol, a lesser evil, or even a misunderstood good. In some periods, hashish use was widespread in urban centres, then banned, then tolerated again, cycling through generations of quiet rebellion and official denial. In this circle, there's no denial, just acceptance, respect. The hashish is passed like prayer beads, each person taking only what they need, not what they want. There are no loud voices, no rush, everything feels intentional. You sit in silence, watching the fire's glow cast long shadows on the sand. Someone recites a poem about a garden that exists only in memory, where the trees bloom with forgotten laughter, and every leaf carries the scent of a lost moment. You don't understand the words exactly, but you do. You really do. When the bowl comes back around, you take one more draw. Not for the high, but for the stillness. The calm is different here. It doesn't hold you like a blanket. It sits beside you like an old friend not needing to speak. Later that night, wrapped in wool under a sky so thick with stars it looks powdered with sugar, you listen to the last embers hiss and pop. The fire is dying. The smoke lingers. The men around you sleep in loose heaps, snoring like desert lions. You lie there, high but grounded, and you think, this plant has travelled so far, worn so many shapes, been blessed and banned and burned and buried and resurrected, and still, here it is, glowing in a clay bowl, breathing with the desert. You close your eyes, and the stars, finally, blink back. You follow the river upstream until the trees change shape. Broad leaves become needles, the air thickens with wood smoke and pine, and the sun takes longer to reach the ground. You've entered a new world now, dense, ancient, humming with the quiet energy of moss and stone. There are no temples here, no marble houses or high towers, just the long, slow breath of the forest, and the soft rustle of the people who live within it. They don't announce themselves. They don't need to. You're led into a clearing one evening just as the sky begins melting into its copper-blue dusk. A circle is formed, not strict, not ceremonial, just people sitting on logs or thick pelts, passing around something carved from bone and wrapped in bark fibre. At first, you assume it's tobacco. You've seen enough smoking circles by now to know how they start. Someone lights something, someone else tells a story, laughter bubbles up like a spring, and then suddenly it's midnight and nobody remembers whose turn it was to keep the fire going. But this one feels different, quieter, older. The elder who hands you the pipe doesn't say anything. He just nods. The pipe is light, packed with a dark blend that smells like earth after rain, sweet and strange. Not pure cannabis, not even mostly cannabis, but it's in there. You can feel it, wrapped in something stronger, something floral, something a little spicy. You inhale, it scratches on the way in, then settles like honey in your lungs. They call it peace smoke. Here's what you've stepped into. A ritual blend that predates writing, passed through generations of native peoples in the Americas. While tobacco dominates the historical record, often front and centre in ceremonial use, some tribes are known to have used kinnikinnick, a mixture of various herbs, bark and plants that occasionally included cannabis, especially after its arrival from Eurasia in the post-Columbian exchange. But even before that, the concept of blending smoke for spiritual and communal purposes was deeply embedded in indigenous life. Cannabis, once introduced, simply found its way into the recipe. This isn't about getting high, not in the way you've experienced. There's no giggling, no sprawling monologues about the colour of the stars. Instead, the smoke makes everything sharper and softer at the same time. You become more aware of your breath, the warmth of your knees, the heartbeat of the forest itself. Across the fire, someone begins to speak. Not loudly, not formally, just a story. About a coyote who tricked a river into flowing uphill. About a woman who turned into a cedar tree to escape a storm. No one interrupts. No one adds jokes. The fire crackles, the pipe continues its slow, respectful journey, and the story unspools like thread in steady hands. Quirky fact for your brain to nibble on. The Haudenosaunee and some Great Plains tribes were early adopters of herbal blend smoking, using natural pipes carved from stone, clay, and even animal bone. And after the 16th century, once cannabis entered through European and African trade, it found a quiet home in some traditions, not widespread, not central, but present. Particularly among medicine people who recognised its calming, dream-inviting qualities. In some areas, it was used alongside tobacco to help with insomnia, anxiety, or to coax vision during long nights of vigil. The elder next to you leans over and murmurs, "The smoke opens the ears that don't have holes." You nod, not because you understand, but because it sounds like something that should be true. And here comes the debate, predictable as always. Some historians claim cannabis never truly integrated into native traditions, that its appearance in later centuries was peripheral, coincidental, or even imposed. Others, drawing from oral history and ethnobotanical evidence, argue that the plant was simply absorbed into pre-existing systems, honoured, not worshipped, and used with care. The truth, as usual, probably lives in the smoke. Flexible, adaptable, impossible to hold in one hand for long. You lie back, the firelight flickering against the leaves above. A breeze drifts through the clearing, and you hear the wings of a night bird slicing silently overhead. The pipe comes back around. You take one last pull, not greedy, just grateful. Your mind doesn't spin. It glows. Thoughts rise like bubbles through deep water. You think of every smoke circle you've sat in, every time the plant has changed its shape to meet the culture, the people, the moment. You think of laughter in caves, oil in temples, resin in clay bowls, sweet milk under banyan trees, and now, here, surrounded by trees older than memory, stories older than maps, you understand that cannabis doesn't need to be the star of the ritual. Sometimes it just makes space for the stars to show up. The elder finishes his story and there's a long silence, not awkward, sacred. A pause that feels earned. Then someone hums a few soft notes and the fire shifts colour, like it's been listening too. You curl up on your side, blanket pulled over your shoulder, and let the smoke settle into your skin. The sounds of the forest are louder now, frogs, leaves, wind, fire. Everything singing its small, necessary song. And just before sleep folds you in, you realise This is peace, not the absence of noise, not the absence of thought, but the presence of something older than both. The sea crossing is rougher this time, less adventure, more endurance. You sit wedged between barrels of salted fish and tightly wound bales of hemp fibre, the stink of tar and sweat swirling with every roll of the ship. The sky above is a smear of dull grey. The crew doesn't talk much, just work and spit. Occasionally someone sings a verse or two of a shanty so filthy it could curdle goat's milk. You laugh anyway. It helps. What doesn't help is the stiff breeze and the constant sense that you're slowly becoming pickled in a briny barrel of your own thoughts. But you're not here for poetry. You're here for cargo. You've followed cannabis this far and now it's sailing literally across oceans, and not in ceremonial pouches or quiet garden plots anymore. No, this time it's stacked high, coiled into rope, stuffed into ship seams, and tucked into crates destined for the so-called New World. Hemp, the industrial sibling of the cannabis you've smoked, soaked, and salved across continents, is now a commodity. It smells less like enlightenment and more like money. By the time you dock on the coast of a burgeoning colonial settlement, your bones feel like they've been boiled. The land smells new, but not untouched. Already the trees are vanishing, cut and stacked to make room for ports, roads, and endless rows of identical houses. Everything feels planned, gridded, forced into boxes that ignore the curve of the earth. And yet in one of those tidy gardens, just behind a whitewashed shack near the docks, you spot it. Cannabis. Not wild, not sacred. Cultivated, domestic, functional. A farmer greets you with a handshake too firm for your liking and proudly shows off his hemp field. Grows like the devil, he says. Rope, sails, even paper if you know what you're doing. You nod. You know. You've seen this plant's roots stretch from mountaintop graves to bang-sipping mystics. But here, it's just a crop, a unit, a square on a ledger. And yet, it's still here. The colonists grow hemp not because they love it, but because they need it. England demands it. Ships won't sail without it. Wars won't happen without it. And so, fields are cleared, seeds are planted, and cannabis becomes the backbone of industry. No one talks about its other uses, not openly. But you hear whispers from sailors, workers, and the occasional doctor, that a little dried leaf under the tongue calms seasickness, that a poultice eases burns, that a quiet smoke behind the tool shed makes the sermons more tolerable. Historical time. By the early 1600s, hemp cultivation was not only encouraged in colonial America, it was required. In Virginia, farmers were legally obligated to grow hemp as part of their contribution to the empire. It was prized for its strength and versatility. The psychoactive properties were known, yes, but not the focus, at least not in polite company. Medicinal texts from the time make cautious mention of its calming influence, and use in treating pain or melancholy, but always with a hint of nervousness. After all, not everything useful should be pleasurable, but of course, pleasure finds its way in. On the edges of the settlement, where rules stretch thinner, you find a small group of freedmen and indentured workers sitting around a low fire, laughing between mouthfuls of stew. You're invited without ceremony. No one asks who you are. One man pulls out a pipe, packs it with something you recognise instantly. This isn't just tobacco. He grins. A friend from Barbados left me a gift, stronger than the local leaf. You sit. You accept. The smoke is smooth, layered with sugar cane and spice. Your limbs loosen. The stars above seem closer, like they're leaning in to hear your thoughts. Around you, the group begins swapping stories, of lost siblings, of cruel overseers, of the dreams they keep having of rivers that flow backward. It's not mystical, it's survival. This smoke, in this place, is rebellion. Here's your quirky history nugget. As cannabis travelled with colonialism, it also spread through resistance. Enslaved Africans brought herbal knowledge across the Atlantic, and some of that knowledge included cannabis, not just for healing, but for calming, for dreaming, for remembering who you were in a world trying to make you forget. In plantation records, you'll find veiled references to leaf use among the enslaved, often discouraged by overseers who didn't like what happened when people began thinking too much, or too clearly. The scholarly debate here gets thick. Was cannabis an active part of colonial resistance, a hidden tool of spiritual endurance? Or was it simply one of many plants caught up in the swirling storm of migration, trade, and exploitation? Some argue that cannabis use in early America was overblown, that it remained marginal until the 19th century. Others point to consistent, if quiet, threads, recipes, rituals, oral histories that say otherwise. As usual, the truth is somewhere in the haze. Back at the fire, the pipe goes around again. The laughter fades into song. A soft rhythm, claps, humming, feet tapping against dirt. Someone sings in a language you don't recognize but somehow understand. You close your eyes. The smoke wraps around your thoughts like linen. You see every place the plant has travelled, every shape it's taken. You see the field hands plucking hemp stalks, unaware they're part of a story that began before ploughs, before empires. You see the pipe passed behind a tool shed, a small moment of joy clutched tight like a secret. You see smoke rising, always rising, in the spaces between control and freedom. You sleep that night under the stars, surrounded by people who know how to breathe deeply, even when the world presses on their lungs. The smell of hemp fields drifts in from the edge of the settlement, and somewhere nearby, a wolf howls once, then goes quiet. And the smoke, as always, lingers. You're deep in the woods again, this time somewhere between superstition and scandal, where the trees lean in like gossiping old women, and every stone path leads either to a sermon or a secret. Europe in the grip of the late medieval period is a strange, prickly place. The churches are taller now, louder, and constantly worried that someone somewhere might be enjoying themselves without approval. The air smells of incense and damp wool, but in the darker corners, away from the town squares and judgmental windows the old ways still breathe, you're led to a gathering by a woman with a voice like wind through dry leaves. She doesn't give her name, and you don't ask. She wears layers of fabric that somehow never rustle, and a pouch at her hip tied with red thread and bone beads. She moves through the forest like someone returning home. Eventually the trees thin just enough to reveal a clearing, a ring of stones, a smouldering fire, and 5 others already seated on woven mats. One nods. Another passes a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside, dried herbs, crumbled finely, sweet and sharp and earthy. You recognise some, mugwort, yarrow. But there's also cannabis, unmistakable in scent and texture. Not the star of the blend, but present, woven in. Just like the ritual itself, older than language, disguised beneath new fears. This isn't a party, it's something closer to a rehearsal for freedom. They call it flying ointment, though the term makes you blink. You don't think you'll be leaving the ground tonight. Still, the paste they pass around is slick, fragrant, warmed between palms before being rubbed into wrists, temples, and behind the ears. The smoke comes after, a bundle tossed onto the coals, letting its scent rise and thicken like fog. You breathe deep, not once, not greedily, just enough. Let's pause for some historical shadow play. Throughout medieval Europe, particularly during the 14th to 16th centuries, herbalists, many of them women, often labelled witches, developed ointments and salves infused with psychoactive plants. Belladonna, henbane, mandrake, and yes, in some recorded cases, cannabis. These concoctions weren't always ingested. They were absorbed through the skin, allowing for slower onset and a gentler drift into altered states. They were used for pain relief, childbirth, and, according to inquisitors, consorting with demons during midnight flight rituals. Flight, of course, being metaphorical. Probably, mostly. You sit now surrounded by women whose eyes reflect firelight and centuries of inherited caution. No one speaks loudly, no one laughs, but the smoke weaves through the group like an old, familiar story. Your limbs go light, your breath slows. The fire crackles in rhythm with your pulse. Someone begins to sing, not words, just a melody, low and looping. Another hums in harmony. You close your eyes. Behind your lids, shapes move. Not visions exactly, but impressions. A field of violet flowers swaying in slow motion. A fox walking backward. A wheel made of bones turning underwater. You don't feel afraid. You feel invited. Quirky fact. In some folklore, witches were said to anoint broomsticks with flying ointment, then straddle them to fly to sabbats. Modern historians suggest this was symbolic of trance states induced by the ointments, particularly those that included mild hallucinogens like cannabis. The broomstick? Likely a metaphor, or a salve applicator. Either way, it was enough to terrify clergymen for centuries, and yes, the scholarly debate runs hot here. Some argue that witches' brews were a product of hysteria and confessions made under torture. Others point to preserved herbals, court records, and oral traditions that suggest skilled healers, often midwives, knew exactly what they were doing. They used plants not to fly but to survive, to ease childbirth, to grieve, to imagine. You understand that now, as the ritual deepens. No one's cackling, no one's levitating, but your mind, it's quiet, spacious. The sorrow you didn't know you were carrying slips off your shoulders like a heavy shawl. You feel your place in this circle, not just this one, but all the others before it. The cave smoke, the festival fire, the oil-soaked hands of monks, the bang-shared riverbank, the desert pipe. Cannabis, again, is not the main act. It's a thread, a bass note, an herbal chorus member holding harmony, while the henbane and mugwort do their wilder tricks. But it's essential. It steadies the descent, keeps the trance soft, the edges kind. You open your eyes as the song fades. The others sit still, watching the smoke spiral. One woman draws a symbol in the dirt, a circle with two curved lines, like a seed sprouting in both directions. No one explains it. No one needs to. You feel its meaning in your ribs. And here's the hidden truth of this time. Even under persecution, even with pyres crackling in the distance, and inquisitors peeking through keyholes, the knowledge survived, passed in whispers, hidden in gardens, scribbled in the margins of cookbooks and prayer books. Cannabis, like its practitioners, adapted, kept low, rooted, waiting. You sleep that night wrapped in a wool cloak that smells of fire and crushed herbs. The forest hums around you. Owls blink silently. Somewhere in the distance, a stream sings the same melody you heard earlier. The ritual lingers, not loud, not wild, but enduring. And when morning comes, you leave without farewell. That's how it works here. No trail, no footprints, just a memory of warmth, a trace of smoke on your sleeve, and the knowledge that magic doesn't always need a wand. Sometimes it just needs a plant. You step off the train into a world that hums with gears and soot. The industrial age hits your lungs before it hits your eyes. Smoke, steam, coal dust clinging to everything like a second skin. The buildings reach higher now, metal skeletons wrapped in stone and brick. Horses compete with carriages and strange contraptions that spit sparks and belch smoke. Men wear waistcoats and pocket watches. Women walk fast with purpose and scandal just under the hem. You pass through alleys that smell like oil and revolution. And somewhere between the factories and the fog, you catch a familiar scent, muted, but there. Cannabis, cloaked in progress. You find it, of all places, in an apothecary. Not some backroom den, not a mystic's tent. A clean glass-fronted shop where everything's been alphabetized and priced. Shelves of brown bottles with neat handwritten labels, jars of dried roots and powders lined up like soldiers. The man behind the counter wears tiny spectacles, and a look that says he's memorised the contents of every vial in the room. You ask, with a casual tone, if he carries tinctures for sleep. He raises one eyebrow, turns, and selects a small blue bottle from the back shelf. Cannabis indica, he says, placing it on the counter. Imported from India. Commonly used for insomnia, nerves, and certain melancholic disturbances. A few drops in water should suffice. No secrecy, no shame, just a transaction. You try it that night in a modest boarding house, sitting beside a narrow window as the gas lamps flicker below. A few drops in a tin cup of lukewarm tea. Bitter, sharp, metallic. But within an hour your mind softens like paper in rain. The city noise recedes. The creaks of old wood settle into a rhythm. You sleep, not just well, but deeply. Not the restless drift of someone on the road, but the dreamless anchor of someone who's finally allowed to rest. Let's pull the curtain back. During the 19th century, cannabis entered Western medicine through colonial channels, particularly British physicians and soldiers stationed in India. They observed its use in traditional Ayurvedic and Unani systems, and brought it home in oils, tinctures and edible forms. Dr. William O'Shaughnessy, an Irish physician working for the East India Company, became one of the first to document its therapeutic effects in Western medical journals. Soon, cannabis indica appeared in pharmacopoeias across Europe and North America, prescribed for everything from migraines to menstrual cramps to hysteria. But the story doesn't stay clean for long. With popularity came suspicion. The effects, soothing to some, intoxicating to others, didn't fit comfortably into the tidy categories of Victorian morality. Some patients praised its relief, others reported paranoia, confusion, and a loss of self-control, which, for the tight-laced middle classes, was more terrifying than disease. You see that tension play out in a dusty London parlour 2 weeks later. A group of intellectuals, poets, scientists, skeptics, and one mysterious woman who says she communes with energetic vibrations, have gathered for what they call a psychic evening. The host produces a tin of hashish lozenges, made in Paris, wrapped in foil with gold lettering. More civilized than smoke, he assures you. The lozenge tastes like cloves and regret. But the effect is delightful. Your thoughts stretch like warm dough. The gas lamps look like constellations. A man reads aloud from a book of Persian poetry, and for once, you feel like you understand every metaphor. You laugh. You cry. You forget which one came first. Quirky fact break. In the mid-1800s, France became briefly obsessed with hashish thanks to a group of artists and writers known as Le Club des Hashichins. They met in Paris to explore the creative effects of cannabis, often consuming it in the form of dawamesque, a paste of cannabis, honey and spices. Members included Victor Hugo, Baudelaire, and even Alexandre Dumas. While they romanticised the experience, they also feared it, seeing it as a key to dangerous mental depths. Back at the parlour, the mood shifts. The psychic woman begins describing the colour of everyone's souls. Someone else begins levitating, or at least claims to. You just lean back in your chair, watching the plaster ceiling swirl gently and think about how far cannabis has come. From bone pipes in caves to this. Armchairs, velvet and French confections that promise transcendence in 20 minutes or less. But of course, backlash is coming. You hear it in the medical journals, now filling with cautious studies and moralising footnotes. You read it in the pamphlets handed out by concerned citizens. Cannabis is being recast, not as a healing agent, but as a threat to decency, productivity and empire. Foreign, disruptive, dangerous. You know this arc. You've seen it in other places. Curiosity followed by fear. Use followed by control. Still, tonight the plant is safe. Still legal. Still respected by those who understand its gentler side. You fall asleep on a borrowed sofa, listening to someone argue about metaphysics in the next room, and you dream not of flight or ecstasy, but of balance. Of a world that might one day stop trying to turn medicine into sin. By the time you reach the 20th century, the world is moving too fast to see itself clearly. Trains, then cars, then airplanes, telephones buzz, radios hum, cities sprawl and stretch and light up like fever dreams. And tucked somewhere between jazz and war, medicine and paranoia, cannabis finds itself on trial, not just in courtrooms, but in headlines, textbooks and living rooms. The plant hasn't changed, not really. But the story told about it, that's changing fast. You find yourself in a city now, dusty at the edges, noisy at the core. It could be New York or Chicago or Los Angeles. It doesn't matter. What matters is the energy. It's the 1930s. The air tastes like ambition and asphalt. Streetcars screech. Neon flickers. There's a saxophone bleeding from a speakeasy basement, and somewhere above, a billboard warns you that marijuana turns men into monsters. You roll your eyes, nod at the ad, at the hysteria. You follow the music. That's where the plant is now. In smoke-filled rooms with low lights and quick fingers, in the hands of trumpet players and blues singers and dancers who've had enough of quiet suffering. Cannabis has drifted into the jazz scene like a clever guest no one remembers inviting, and it fits right in. The rhythm matches its mood, loose, improvisational, deep in the pocket. You sit in a corner booth sipping bootleg gin and watch the saxophonist lean back between solos, take a long drag from a joint, and return to the melody with twice the soul. You smoke too, of course, passed casually between strangers like a secret handshake. The weed is dry and harsh, rolled in crinkled brown paper, but the effect is familiar. Your thoughts swing in time with the bass line. The room tilts just enough to feel like dancing. Time stutters, repeats, rewrites itself, and you're not just watching history, you're in it, head bobbing, foot tapping, smile lazy and wide. Here's the fact sheet. By the early 20th century, cannabis use was widespread in certain subcultures across the US, particularly among Black and Mexican communities. It was legal in most places, though quietly frowned upon. Jazz musicians popularized it under nicknames like Reefer and Gauge, praising its ability to loosen the mind and deepen the groove. But as cannabis gained cultural visibility, so did the backlash. Racist and xenophobic rhetoric painted the plant as a threat, linked to crime, deviance, and degeneration. You see it begin. Not all at once, but in murmurs. The newspapers blame cannabis for everything from car accidents to moral collapse. Politicians echo these headlines louder each time. A man named Harry Anslinger, head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, becomes the plant's loudest enemy. He doesn't hate the plant so much as the people who use it, and he's smart enough to know how to tell a scary story. Quirky moment. In 1936, a film called Reefer Madness is released. It shows clean-cut teens turning into criminals, addicts, and raving lunatics, all after a single puff of marijuana. It's absurd, laughable, but it works. The public, already nervous, begins to believe. The plant becomes the villain in a horror story that keeps changing but never really dies. You watch the crackdown roll in like a slow grey fog. First come the bans, then the raids, then the silence. The clubs still hum, but more carefully now. The joints are smaller, smoked faster. The laughter is quieter. Musicians are arrested, immigrants are demonized. The same plant that once healed, relaxed, inspired, is now contraband. There's debate, of course. There always is. Medical professionals push back. Some quietly admit it still helps. Pain, nausea, nerves. But science is no match for fear. And fear makes for great policy. You spend time in a low-rent boarding house where a woman with tired eyes keeps a small jar of cannabis tincture tucked behind a row of family photographs. She uses it for her arthritis, says it helps more than the morphine ever did. But she never tells her doctor. She just rubs it into her knees and hums old gospel songs and keeps her secrets to herself. You meet a man in New Orleans who swears it makes his trumpet smarter. It tells me what to play, he grins, lighting a match with a flourish. Like it knows where the song wants to go before I do. You see a teenage boy get dragged from a schoolyard in Texas for carrying a pipe carved from bone. The cops laugh while cuffing him. The newspaper will call him a menace. No one will ask what he was running from. The plant doesn't fight back. It just waits. Because here's the thing. Even at its most outlawed, cannabis doesn't disappear. It adapts, goes underground, finds new hands, the same way it learned to dress like medicine in Victorian pharmacies, or tucked itself into gourd pipes under moonlight. It now slips into jazz sets, tenement rooms, desert camps. It always finds a way to stay. You light one last joint on a rooftop in Harlem, the city stretching out like a tired animal beneath you. The stars are shy tonight. The lights below are restless. But the smoke is calm. And in that quiet, high above the chaos moment, you feel something you haven't felt since the monastery. Stillness. Not joy, not grief. Just stillness. The kind that doesn't need permission. You exhale. The smoke disappears into the dark, but the story, it keeps going.